Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of John Allen Chau. We'll embark on a journey to the enigmatic North Sentinel Island in the Andaman Islands, India, to explore the lives of the Sentinelese. The island's inhabitants, they live in complete isolation from the modern world, maintaining a hunter-gatherer lifestyle that dates back tens of thousands of years. Known for their hostility towards outsiders, their language, beliefs, and social structure remain largely unknown, making them a symbol of prehistoric isolation. Tourism has been rapidly developing on the Andaman Islands, attracting visitors from around the world to experience its breathtaking natural beauty. Travelers come to admire the majestic mangrove forests, stroll through lush, tropical jungles, relax on pristine sandy beaches, and savor fresh local cuisine. However, let's turn our focus to North Sentinel Island. This isolated island spans nearly 60 square kilometers and has a roughly circular, shield-like shape. It typically enjoys bright sunshine, but also experiences seasonal winds and monsoons. Satellite images reveal that the island is surrounded by coral reefs and sandy beaches. Almost the entire island, apart from the coastline, is covered by dense tropical forest. Despite thousands of satellite images being taken, the thick forest canopy conceals anything beneath it. Adding to the island's enduring mystery, it is important to note that visiting North Sentinel Island has been strictly prohibited since 1956 under the Protection of Aboriginal Tribes Act for the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. It is illegal to approach the island. A restricted zone of 8 kilometers has been established around it. The Indian Coast Guard regularly patrols the surrounding waters, and anyone attempting to enter the island faces severe penalties, including heavy fines and imprisonment. Additionally, visiting many nearby islands also requires official permits. The Sentinelese remain isolated, fiercely defending their territory despite efforts to make contact. Nearly all attempts have failed. If someone were stranded on the island, Indian authorities would not intervene. Their population is estimated between 80 to 150 individuals. As no official count has been made, they rely on a diet of wild boar, fish, shellfish, and plants, avoiding contact with the outside world and fishing only within their lagoon. They remain within their reefs, fishing only in their lagoons while they use canoes. These are limited to shallow waters, where they propel themselves forward with long poles that reach the seabed. So, the Sentinelese are believed to be unable to move in deep waters, as they have not developed the use of oars. Physically, they are distinctive, broad, muscular, and relatively short. With an average height of about 1.6 meters, none of them are obese. Interestingly, the Sentinelese place high value on metal during their rare interactions with the outside world. They have been seen using arrows with metal tips. In 1974, they took aluminum cookware left behind by the National Geographic Society. The first recorded observation of the Sentinelese occurred in 1771, when Indian sailors passing by noticed a fire on the island's shore. Almost a century later, in 1867, an Indian merchant ship ran aground on one of the island's reefs. The crew reached the shore in search of food and water, but after 3 days, they were attacked by a group of islanders. At the time, no one knew anything about the Sentinelese. In the end, the crew was rescued by a naval team in their rush to escape. The sailors abandoned the damaged vessel and fled to safety. In January 1880, British naval officer Maurice Vidal Portman led an expedition to North Sentinel Island to establish contact with the indigenous people. However, when his team arrived, they could not find any Sentinelese, as the inhabitants had seemingly hidden out of fear. The team followed trails that led to an abandoned village, but no one was there. After several days of fruitless searching, they finding abandoned villages and roads, his team captured 6 people, including an elderly man, a woman, and 4 children. The man and woman died of disease, shortly after their arrival in Port Blair, and the children also began to fall ill. Portman hastily sent the children back to North Sentinel Island with a large supply of gifts in an attempt to establish friendly relations. Portman visited the island again in 1883, 1885, and 1887, but all were unsuccessful. In 1896, a prisoner escaped from the Great Andaman Island detention camp on a makeshift raft and drifted to North Sentinel Beach. His body was discovered by a search party a few days later with multiple arrow wounds and a cut throat. On August 2, 1981, the MV Primrose, carrying a large cargo of chicken feed from Bangladesh to Australia, ran aground in rough seas near North Sentinel Island, trapping its small crew. After several days, the captain sent a distress signal, reporting that more than 50 armed islanders were preparing boats to approach the ship. However, heavy waves prevented the islanders from reaching the vessel, and their arrows were deflected. The 31-member crew had to stay vigilant, armed with axes, pipes, and flare weapons. Nearly a week later, the crew was evacuated by a civilian helicopter chartered by the Oil and Natural Gas Corporation with the assistance of the Indian Navy. After the evacuation, the Sentinelese scavenged the abandoned shipwrecks for iron to use in making weapons. Muhammad, a scrap metal dealer contracted by the government to dismantle the Primrose, recorded friendly exchanges of fruit and small pieces of metal with the Sentinelese, who often approached the wreck at low tide. 2 days later, in the early morning, 3 Sentinelese canoes, carrying about a dozen men, approached the Primrose. Initially apprehensive, the crew threw bananas to the islanders in an attempt to attract them and reduce the possibility of conflict over the next 18 months. The Sentinelese regularly visited the crew while they continued salvage work on the abandoned ship. In 1991, the first instances of peaceful contact with the Sentinelese were recorded during 2 regular expeditions conducted by an Indian anthropological team, which included representatives from various government agencies, as well as anthropologist Madhumala Chattopadhyay. This marked the first time a woman on an expedition made contact with the Sentinelese during the visit on January 4, 1991. The Sentinelese initially approached the team unarmed. They accepted the coconuts offered to them, but retreated when the team signaled for them to come closer. The team returned to the main ship, MV Tarmugli, and later returned to the island in the afternoon, where they found at least 2 dozen Sentinelese on the beach. One of the men aimed a bow and arrow at the team, but a woman pushed the arrow down, prompting the man to bury his weapon in the sand. For the first time, the Sentinelese approached the boats quite closely. The tribal welfare director then personally handed over 5 bags of coconuts. In 1995, the Indian government decided not to forcibly contact or assimilate the Sentinelese into modern civilization. By 1996, all visits to North Sentinel Island were completely stopped. In 2004, a massive tsunami devastated the Indian Ocean region, displacing hundreds of thousands of people and claiming many lives. This natural disaster also significantly affected North Sentinel Island. Tectonic activity caused the island and nearby seabed to rise by almost 2 meters. This uplift exposed the surrounding coral reef, which dried out and eventually died. These changes are visible in satellite images starting in 2004. Following the tsunami, an Indian helicopter flew over the island to check if the Sentinelese needed assistance. The islanders, however, emerged and aimed their arrows at the helicopter, clearly signaling they wanted no contact. In 2018, John Allen Chow, a Christian missionary, attempted to visit North Sentinel Island. Believing he was uniquely capable of conquering its isolation, John was born on December 18, 1991, in Scottsboro, Alabama. His father, Patrick Chow, a Chinese-American psychiatrist, while his mother, Linda Adams Chow, was an organizer for Chi Alpha. John grew up in a warm and loving family, with an older brother and sister. Both of his parents were devout Christians, contributing to their successful academic careers. While his siblings pursued college and careers in medicine, John chose a different path. He developed a strong passion for Christianity and travel. John loved outdoor activities and often went hiking with friends. From a young age, he dreamed of living on an uninhabited island, combining his passion for adventure and his faith. He decided to become a missionary. He traveled extensively, meeting people and spreading the Christian faith. At the age of 17, he learned about the isolated North Sentinel Island and its inhabitants. John believed he could help the Sentinelese by introducing them to Christianity and connecting them with God. In 2015, John took his first trip to the Andaman Islands. Although he avoided getting too close to North Sentinel Island, he began studying the area, building connection, and preparing for a future mission. He returned home without visiting the island he had dreamed of, but resolved to go back. By 2016, John was living in California, working as a guide, and traveling across the United States. Next year, he also organized a missionary training camp to teach others how to engage with remote tribes. John became deeply fixated on North Sentinel Island and frequently discussed it with friends and family. He shared his plans to visit the island. John believed it was his divine mission to tell the Sentinelese about God and bring light to their dark world. In October 2018, John traveled to Port Blair to prepare for his trip to the island. He created picture cards for communication, collected gifts for the islanders, and bought medical supplies and other essential items to prioritize the safety of the Sentinelese to minimize health risks. He vaccinated himself against common viruses and self-quarantined for 11 days, despite efforts. John could not secure official permission, making his trip illegal under Indian law. Determined to proceed, he approached local fishermen and eventually convinced 3 of them to take him close to the island for $400 late on the night of November 14, 2018. The fishermen secretly took John aboard their motorboat and set out to sea. Their destination was about 60 miles away. By early morning on November 15, they reached the waters near North Sentinel Island. Despite the fishermen's warnings, John left the boat, got into his canoe, and paddled alone toward the shore. As he approached, the Sentinelese noticed him while he was still in the water. They shouted in their language, clearly expressing their displeasure at the unexpected visitor. The islanders exchanged looks and then decided to defend their territory. They aimed their arrows at John, who panicked and quickly retreated to his canoe, paddling as fast as he could. He returned to the motorboat, narrowly escaping harm. Although terrified by the experience, John was deeply disappointed. His mission had failed, and all his efforts felt futile. The next day, John decided to return to the island. As he paddled toward the shore, he heard the cries of the islanders and the sound of drums. Soon, he noticed a man standing on a high coral reef. The man, his chest painted white, said something to John. In an attempt to communicate, John repeated the man's words and sang a prayer in response. The islander laughed loudly. Suddenly, more Sentinelese appeared on the shore. Gathering into a crowd, John offered them gifts, but 2 men dragged his canoe into the dense forest. At one point, a young islander aimed an arrow directly at him. Panicking, John held up his Bible. The arrow struck the Bible, sparing him. Startled and afraid, John fled into the water. He swam as fast as he could. Once he could no longer touch the sea floor. After swimming about a mile, he reached the fisherman's boat that had brought him to the island and managed to escape to safety. Disheartened, that day, he wrote in his journal, "Lord, is this island Satan's last stronghold, where none have heard or even had the chance to hear your name? The eternal lives of this tribe is at hand, and I think it's worthwhile to declare Jesus to these people. Please do not be angry at them or at God. If I get killed, don't retrieve my body." Early on the morning of November 17, John set out once more for the wild island, this time in a motorboat with the fisherman before switching to his canoe. He wrote in his journal, "I hope this is not my last entry, but if it is, glory to God," wearing only black shorts. John climbed into his canoe and paddled alone toward North Sentinel Island. For the third time, the fisherman stayed in the motorboat at sea with John's belongings, waiting for him until the afternoon. When John failed to return, they left and went home the following day. The fishermen returned to the island to observe the shoreline from a distance and search for John. They noticed something unusual on the shore. As they looked closer, they realized it was a motionless man resembling John, dressed in black shorts. While they watched, the Sentinelese came on, dragged the body off the beach, and disappeared into the jungle. Frightened, the fishermen returned to Port Blair and informed John's family of his death. John's parents, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances were heartbroken. Though they understood the drastic decision he had made in pursuit of his missionary work, the authorities now faced two key questions: what steps to take next, and whether to attempt retrieving John's body to return it to his homeland. Upon examining John's journal, the police discovered an entry where he had written, "If it happens that I am killed, I ask that my body not be taken from the island." 3 days after John's death, his family shared a post on social network announcing that John had died in India while engaging with the Sentinelese tribe on the Andaman Islands. Part of their message read, "We forgive those reportedly responsible for his death. He went to them willingly, and no one should face prosecution because of his actions." The authorities ultimately decided not to file any criminal charges. The fishermen who had transported John to the remote island were released on bail, despite several attempts by the Indian police to recover John's body. The operation was deemed too dangerous, and officials chose not to proceed. To this day, John's death has not been officially confirmed. His mother, Linda, continues to believe that her son is still alive and living on the island. She tells the media that John will return one day and share the truth himself. Meanwhile, his father, Patrick, holds the missionary organization responsible for John's death, accusing them of pressuring his son into taking such extreme risks and encouraging him to visit the perilous island. The future of the Sentinelese remains uncertain. Will they be able to preserve their way of life on their secluded island? In a way, their independence from the challenges of modern life could even inspire a sense of admiration. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Tyler Edmonds. May 10, 2003. Joey missed the air show where Joey was expected to be present. The next day was Mother's Day, and he also ignored this important event. In the past, he had always made an effort to celebrate important occasions with his loved ones, so after these two incidents, his family began to worry that something was wrong. Joey's mother and sister went to his house, where they discovered a distressing scene. Joey was lying face down on his bed, with a large gunshot wound in the back of his head. They immediately called 911 to report the horrifying find. When police arrived, they began investigating the crime scene. Their first step was to interview Joey's mother and sister, who had found the body. Although they were understandably distressed, they answered questions calmly. They believed that Joey's wife, Christy, was the only person who might have harmed him. Given their troubled relationship, Christy was known to have affairs and had expressed a desire to be free of her husband, making her a prime suspect, especially since she was not at home at the time of the incident. The police also located a cross at Joey's mother's house in the nearby small town of Little Rock. Christy was questioned by the police but acted as if she had no idea what had happened. When they informed her of her husband's death, she began to cry and mourn him. The police did not find her behavior suspicious and continued to collect evidence. Then, concrete evidence against Christy emerged. Before any charges were filed against her, she arrived at the Stark Willie police station with her half-younger brother Tyler Edmonds. At the sheriff's office, Tyler expressed anger at her situation and wanted to protect her. Since Tyler was only 13 years old and could not confront Joey, a grown man, directly, Tyler came up with a plan. Tyler took a rifle and shot Joey in the back of the head while he was sleeping. Meanwhile, police questioned Tyler, without an adult or attorney present, a clear breach of protocol that would later affect the case. The boy's mother was alerted and rushed to the local police station. Tyler initially denied any involvement in the incident, but his story changed when his sister entered the room and gestured. He then repeated his sister's story, admitting that in the early hours of the morning, he and Christy had gone to the bedroom and pulled the trigger on a rifle, killing her husband. The mother was devastated when she heard the confession. She collapsed to her knees and cried. It was clear that the 13-year-old boy couldn't have committed the crime alone, as he simply lacked the strength to handle the weapon properly. The boy stated that he was unable to pull the trigger himself and needed his sister's assistance. Following the confession, the police began to view the boy as the main perpetrator and his sister as an accomplice. According to Tyler, he had given his sister the rifle beforehand. It was an old family .22 caliber gun that Christy had requested a few weeks before the incident. She was afraid of a large dog that frequently came into their yard and wanted to be armed for protection. Tyler did not want Christy or her children to be in danger, so he willingly gave her the gun. However, Tyler loved animals and begged Christy not to harm the dog. She eventually assured him that she would only shoot into the air if there was any danger, just to scare the pesky animal away. Before giving the gun to Christy, Tyler believed that the gun was broken because he and his friends had tried to fix it but failed. The old rifle had been gathering dust in the attic for years and was considered a family heirloom. The day before the incident, Tyler was picked up from school by his older sister, Christy. However, Christy was out with her new boyfriend and forgot to pick Tyler up. She then arrived a few hours late, picked Tyler up, and took him to her house. After returning home from school, Christy took Tyler to the backyard to test the rifle, and the rifle broke and failed to fire. Christy then put the broken gun in the trunk of her car. Police were convinced that something in Tyler's story did not fit and did not match his sister Christy's account. When asked by police how he held the gun and fired the shot, Tyler responded vaguely. Although he confessed, he was unable to describe the murder. A few days later, Tyler wrote a retraction. According to he pleaded guilty because he wanted to protect his half-older sister. He believed that he would not go to prison because of his age, so he was willing to accept responsibility for Joey's death. As a result, he was unwittingly held responsible for Christy's crimes and now faces life in prison. Tyler told a new story. He said that on May 10, 2003, he was getting ready for a trip with Christy to visit their father. The day before, he had slept over at his sister's house. That Saturday morning, Tyler woke up early to his sister's alarm clock to get ready for the trip. While waiting in the car with Christy's daughter, they sat together for about 5 minutes. As Tyler was adjusting the radio, he suddenly heard a loud bang coming from the house. He believed that the rifle was still in the trunk of the car, so he didn't think much of the noise he heard. Christy had a cat that often knocked things over and broke things, so he assumed that was the cause of the noise, especially since Christy was usually loud. A few minutes later, Christy left the house and got into the car, and Tyler thought they had left without incident. It was only on the way back that Christy revealed that she had shot Joey. Tyler was stunned. Christy cried and begged him to help her avoid the death penalty. So Tyler promised to take some responsibility, arguing that because he was young, he would not face severe punishment. Was Tyler really the one who killed his sister's husband? To answer this question, the police had to delve into the details of this family's life. Tyler and Christy went to the same school, but the girl was significantly older and graduated earlier. As a student, Tyler had always been a smart and hardworking child, sweet, kind and calm. In addition, he was a sociable boy, so he easily found a common language with his classmates and others. It seemed like he had a bright future. Tyler's mother, Sharon, raised Tyler on her own. His parents divorced when he was young due to his father's aggressive issues. Eventually, his mother ran out of patience and could no longer tolerate his behavior. Sharon filed for divorce, gaining full custody so as not to put Tyler in danger. Sharon prevented Tyler from communicating with his biological father, even when a social worker was present. Christy understood that Tyler wanted to see his father despite his mother's restrictions and a court ruling. Tyler still felt the connection to his father and wished to spend time with him. This led him to meet his father against his mother's wishes. One day, Christy asked Tyler if he wanted to spend the weekend at his father's house. Tyler was excited and agreed to the visit. At that time, Christy was married to her husband, Joey, and they had 3 children together. When Joey first met Christy, he was drawn to her beauty and strength, which made him overlook her flaws. Christy is quite manipulative and primarily focuses on her own needs, often ignoring Joey's feelings. She does not hide her affair from him, he is aware of it but chooses to ignore it. It seems that Christy desires a family mainly to satisfy her parents and meet societal expectations. At one point, Christy tried to persuade Tyler that she would be a better guardian for him than their mother, but Tyler resisted her attempts. He loved his mother deeply, and she had long suspected Christy's true motives. Christy often displayed manipulative behavior and had frequent outbursts of anger and aggression, often lashing out at family members over minor issues. These outbursts were impulsive and hard to control. Initially, her family thought her behavior was due to stress, but the reality was more serious. Christy's anger intensified, and she began blaming her caring husband, Joey, for her problems. Despite Christy's unpredictable behavior, Tyler's mother allowed him to continue spending time with her, believing that their close relationship was safe. Both individuals involved in the massacre were arrested and charged with murder, which, under Mississippi law, carries the death penalty. However, a judge decided to try Tyler Edmonds as an adult due to the serious nature of the crime. Despite this, because he was a minor, he could not receive a death sentence. Instead, it was anticipated that he would receive a sentence without the possibility of parole. Tyler Edmonds' trial began on July 20, 2004. This case garnered significant attention because the primary perpetrator of the brutal massacre was just a 13-year-old schoolboy. Tyler was defended by one of the state's best attorneys, who believed that Tyler's initial confession was a lie. The defense also believed that the confession was obtained under pressure from the police. The child admitted that he was frightened when he found himself being questioned, especially because he was initially questioned without his mother and attorney present, which was a violation. The only physical evidence in the case, apart from the bullet, included Christy's fingerprints found on the porch and motion sensors. The lights were turned off during the crime, likely to avoid alerting the neighbors. Christy's fingerprints were also the only ones found on the gun. The Tyler claimed he made the false confession to protect his older sister from the death penalty, believing that, because of his age, he wouldn't be punished for the crime. However, when he realized he could face serious consequences, he became scared and refused to support his sister. During the trial, the judge allowed the prosecution to present Tyler's confession in his own words. The jury watched a videotape of Tyler's confession. The jury deliberated for about 5 hours before reaching a decision. The defense believed that Tyler would be acquitted due to the weakness of the evidence against him. However, on July 24, 2004, 15-year-old Tyler Edmonds was convicted of the murder of Joey Fulgham and sentenced to life in prison. Following the verdict, the attorney quickly filed an appeal and continued to seek justice for Tyler by pushing for a review of his case. Investigations uncovered numerous errors in the handling of the case, and the investigation relied heavily on circumstantial evidence. The key piece of evidence was Tyler's own confession, but the defense argued that this confession may have been coerced or obtained through psychological pressure from interrogators. Given that the conversation involved a minor, specifically a schoolboy, the officers had significant control over him when left alone. Despite the lawyer's efforts, the Tyler was ultimately imprisoned. Mississippi's laws were quite strict, making it nearly impossible to appeal a conviction, and the process was extremely challenging. However, the lawyer and Tyler's friends and family remained hopeful. They found it hard to believe that he could commit such a brutal murder. Tyler had positive relationships with his family members, including Joey. And he did not have any mental health issues or disorders. Moreover, there was no clear motive for the murder, and many thought Christie's account was unlikely. People believed that Tyler's conviction stemmed from mistakes made by the court and that his confession was influenced by manipulation from his half-sister. Tyler's attorney was determined. The defense acknowledged that a review of the case would only be possible if they appealed vigorously. However, even if they were successful, the review process could take years. As a result, Tyler's trial attracted considerable public attention. In January 2007, a turning point came when the Mississippi Supreme Court agreed to review Tyler's case. This was a significant achievement for the defense attorney, who had finally gotten the court's attention. By this point, Tyler had been in prison for nearly 4 years. According to the expert, there were 2 people holding the rifle. However, he could not determine how many people were involved when the shot was fired based on the trajectory of the bullet. Other experts later challenged his testimony, claiming that it was biased. This put the Mississippi prosecutor's office in a difficult position because they lacked additional evidence. In order to simplify the situation and possibly reduce his sentence, the prosecution offered Tyler a plea deal. They suggested that he could plead guilty to a lesser charge in exchange for a lighter sentence, with the chance of immediate release because he had already served a long sentence. However, Tyler did not want to go free. He was determined to prove his innocence. Rejecting the plea deal meant that Tyler faced the possibility of being convicted again, which could have resulted in him being sentenced to life in prison. Tyler has vehemently denied the charges against him, maintaining that he is innocent and will not plead guilty to a crime he did not commit. On October 28, 2008, Tyler's retrial began. His attorneys viewed the case as a fight for justice. In their opening statements, the defense attorneys emphasized that the legal charges were brought against the 13-year-old boy as if he were an adult. The criminal investigation was riddled with serious errors, and the police failed to respect Tyler's rights during questioning. Following Tyler's confession, law enforcement focused solely on determining his guilt without investigating the truth of his statements. There were significant discrepancies between Tyler's confession and the available evidence, and police were aware of these discrepancies. Authorities had only circumstantial evidence, some of which the attorney believed could be challenged by Christy, Tyler's sister. The defense hoped her testimony would be important in disproving the claim of bias against Tyler. However, on her attorney's advice, Christy chose not to answer any questions, which came as a surprise. The decision suggested to the jury that she might be hiding something. Christy appeared to have selfish motives. She had no concern for the fate of her half-younger brother, and she had good reason to want her husband, Joey, dead. He had a $300,000 life insurance policy that would have paid her a substantial payout if he had died. Before the murder, Christy had asked about the amount of money she would receive upon her husband's death, even though Joey had signed a confidentiality agreement prohibiting such questions. However, she believed that it would be an opportunity that would benefit her since she was the named beneficiary. During the trial, Christy's father testified that she had asked him to provide her with a weapon to help her kill her husband. She had promised him a new Cadillac with the insurance money if he helped her. However, he denied participating in any crime and suggested that she simply divorce Joey. Christie responded that divorce would prevent her from receiving the insurance money, which further exposed her selfish intentions. The attorney was convinced that Christie intended to kill her husband and had manipulated younger brother into pleading guilty to avoid responsibility. At the time of the murder, Tyler Edmonds was an exemplary student with no history of violence or crime. Tyler respected his elders, attended church regularly, and was active in sports, which made him well-liked in the community. No one thought he would be involved in such a violent crime. The defense faced a significant challenge when the prosecutor's office showed the jury a video of Tyler confessing to the crime. In the video, he claimed that he had helped his sister kill her husband. However, the video did not capture the moment Christie entered the room and pressured Tyler into confessing. This omission became a major obstacle to proving Tyler's innocence. To counter the prosecution's claims, the defense needed to convince the jury that his confession was coerced and false. The attorney planned to call an expert on facial expressions and gestures to support this argument, but unfortunately, the judge prohibited the use of such testimony. The defense attorney changed course and decided to focus on inconsistencies in Tyler's testimony. There were several troubling aspects in his confession. For example, Tyler claimed to have seen a large fountain of blood after the rifle shot. However, a forensic expert stated that such a fountain of blood would not have been possible with a head injury, since blood does not immediately begin to flow from that type of wound. Additionally, there would have been no splatter of blood. In fact, the victim had only been shot once with a .22 caliber rifle, creating a small wound and leaving the skull intact. Therefore, it is clear that Tyler fabricated this detail in his story. This scenario is like a fantasy. Tyler had no idea what happened because he never entered Joey's bedroom during the time of the murder. Furthermore, the judge in the retrial favored the defense by allowing the jury to see a video of Tyler recanting his confession, which had been barred from previous hearings. Tyler gave the police a new version of events that completely contradicted his original confession. Tyler said that on the morning of the murder, Joey, Tyler, and Christie had planned to take a short trip to see Tyler's father. He was in the car when he heard strange noises coming from the house but chose not to investigate. Christie then rushed out of the house. On the way back from the trip, Christie revealed to Tyler that she wanted him to take some responsibility for the massacre, believing that this would help her avoid the death penalty. She seemed unconcerned about Tyler's future, even though he had not yet finished school. Tyler agreed to her proposal because he genuinely wanted to help and protect Christie. October 31, 2008 marked the final day of the retrial, and the jury's decision was based on what testimony they felt was credible. On that day, Tyler presented his defense and admitted that he had pleaded guilty at Christie's urging, believing that as a minor he would not face prison time. And Christie believed that Tyler's confession would help her avoid the death penalty and save her life. Tyler and Christie had agreed that he would take the blame for the crime after she signaled him, but they never specified what that signal would be. During the interrogation following the murder, Christie entered the room, sat next to Tyler, and took his hand, which he interpreted as the signal. After the prosecutor's final statements, the defense attorney made his closing statement. He argued that aside from 13-year-old Tyler's confession, there was no substantial evidence linking Tyler to the murder. He also expressed doubts about the reliability of a child's testimony under such stressful circumstances. The jury's anxiety seemed endless. When they finally returned, 12 jurors declared Tyler, then 19, innocent. After serving 5 years in prison for a crime he did not commit, he was finally free. However, the question of justice for the family of the deceased Joey remained unresolved. Joey's parents were simply seeking the truth. They were not interested in revenge or punishment. All they wanted was to understand what really happened that tragic day. After being released from prison, Tyler Edmonds returned to normal life, graduated from college, and earned a medical degree. He was eager to pursue higher education in his field. Subsequently, he moved from Mississippi to Florida, where he was not known. He still resides there today and has shared in several interviews that he continues to be haunted by the consequences of the false accusation against him. Although he cannot forget the 5 years he spent in prison, he has managed to adjust to life outside. While some states require that detectives communicate with suspects only in the presence of their parents, many parents lack sufficient knowledge of the criminal code and their rights, leading to frequent disregard for these seemingly straightforward regulations. The involvement of a lawyer is an essential step. Following Tyler's retrial and acquittal, the prosecutor's office began investigating forensic expert Stephen Henn. He claimed he could determine how many people were handling the rifle based on the bullet's trajectory. This bold assertion raised concerns about his expertise and impartiality. As for Christie, she received a 12-year prison sentence for her role in the crime after the initial trial. While incarcerated, she used her manipulative skills to deceive 2 cellmates into assisting her. However, her plan ultimately failed, and in 2008, she faced a retrial for the murders of Joey Fulgham. After her brother was acquitted, she was convicted and sentenced to death. In 2010, Christie's attorney filed an appeal, and after a retrial, her death sentence was changed to life in prison. Christie later wrote a brief letter of apology to her half-brother Tyler, saying only, "Older sister sorry, me know why." This cynical letter only infuriated the Tyler, who had spent nearly 6 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, all for his older sister's sake. As a result, Tyler severed all ties with Christie, believing that her only interest in him was to use him for her own selfish reasons. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jody Jones. Luke Mitchell, born in 1988, was the younger of 2 children. When he was 11, his parents separated, and he stayed with his mother without moving away. The family lived in the small, middle-class town of Eat Houses, Scotland. From a young age, Luke was well-behaved. He enjoyed horseback riding, excelled in school, and had a passion for music. He entered secondary school at St. David. However, during his teenage years, particularly in high school, he began to exhibit unusual behavior. At that time, he met a girl named Jody Jones, who was almost 2 years younger than him. Jody was born in 1989 in another small town in eastern Scotland. The country is generally known for having many small towns located close to one another. Jody was the youngest of 3 children in a middle-class family. Both of her parents worked for the Royal Mail. She was calm, well-mannered, and did well in school. The school director even commented that she had a bright future due to her achievements in class and extracurricular activities. Family was very important to her, and she was a creative person who enjoyed poetry and painting. Jody was close to her eldest sister, Janine. Interestingly, all members of the Jones family had names starting with the letter J, including their parents, James and Judy. The family was decent and appeared genuinely happy until 1998, when the father began experiencing mental health issues and ended his life tragically. This was a devastating blow to the family, and the mother, Judy, had to leave her job to take care of the 3 children. The tragedy affected not only Judy but also the children, who were very worried. Eventually, Janine moved to Mayfield briefly to live with her grandmother, because everything in the house reminded her of the incident. However, after some time, she managed to cope with her problems and returned to her family. Gradually, life returned to normal. Everyone adapted to living without a father, the mother went back to work, and the community supported the family. As a teenager, Jones showed a rebellious streak. She wanted independence and began to experiment with clothes and appearance, listened to heavy rock bands popular at that time, and got herself a piercing. Her mother resisted these changes, particularly when Jody showed interest in alcohol and prohibited substances. She began experimenting with these substances at an early age. Around the time Jodi met Luke, they were both 14 years old. The two met at school, became friends, started skipping classes together, and began dating in February 2003. They were deeply in love and even planned to marry. Jodi wrote in her diary that her feelings for Luke were serious and profound, not just a superficial crush. At the start of her relationship, Jodi didn't tell her friends or family about her boyfriend, Luke. For some reason, she kept him a secret. This hidden relationship went on for quite some time until she finally decided to share it. She confided in her older sister, Janine, revealing that she had a close relationship with Luke and felt very strong emotions for him. Janine understood the seriousness of the situation and informed their mother, Judy. Judy was of course shocked by the news, but was afraid of pushing her daughter away from her, so she decided to act very carefully. Judy wanted to meet Luke to understand him better, given Jodi's deep feelings, and asked Jodi to introduce them. In May 2003, Luke returned home with his girlfriend Jodi to meet her family and get to know them better. However, things didn't go as planned. Judy learned from Luke that Jodi was smoking and drinking with her friends, and Judy also discovered she had tried weed. This makes Judy worried about her daughter's increasingly close interactions and relationship with Luke. Even before the meeting, Judy had looked into Luke's background and learned about some of his unusual habits. Many local people had unfavorable words about him, seeing him as independent and daring, and occasionally rude, though he wasn't involved in any criminal activities. After a brief discussion, Judy was convinced that Luke was a bad influence on her daughter and that their relationship was risky. She forbade them from seeing each other and put her daughter under house arrest until June 30th, hoping this would help her focus on finishing the school year without distractions. However, Judy's plan failed. Luke and Jodi continued to meet in secret. Judy found a path Jodi used almost daily to sneak out and spend time with Luke. They would kiss near her home and share their frustrations about Judy's strictness. Luke and Jodi was eagerly waiting for the end of house arrest to spend their summer vacation together. June 30th finally arrived, and Jodi, very much looking forward to it, was thrilled that house arrest would end. She looked forward to seeing Luke and spending time with him freely. As soon as it was 5 p.m., Jodi left home. She planned to meet Luke for an evening together. Judy allowed her to go but set a curfew of 8 p.m. However, she did not return home at the appointed time, and Judy couldn't reach her by phone. Worried that something was wrong, Judy began searching for her daughter. When Judy went to Luke's house, Jodi was not there. Concerned, she asked Luke about her whereabouts, but he said he hadn't seen her that day. She had not shown up for their meet. This seemed unbelievable, as Jodi had eagerly awaited this moment and had hurried to meet him. Judy became angry, suspecting that he was lying. Judy, distraught, did not believe him and demanded he answers, but he insisted he knew nothing. He agreed to accompany Judy to search for she. Luke's parents owned a specially trained dog, so they decided to follow the route she was supposed to have taken. Since there was only one road linking the neighboring towns where they lived, so they searched this route, but did not find she, which was strange. She continued to ignore their calls and messages. Despite this, Judy, Luke, and the dog persisted, keep searching over and over again, but still in vain. Finally, while walking the route again in the dark around 10:30 p.m., the dog picked up a scent in a wooded area and led them there. Luke followed the dog into the forest, using a flashlight. In the distance, he noticed something white on the ground near some walls. As he approached, he made a horrifying discovery. It was Jodi's half-naked, disfigured body, tied up. She had been killed in a particularly brutal manner, which deeply shocked both Judy and Luke. Judy became hysterical, trying to aid her daughter, but it was too late. She showed no signs of life, and her body had already cooled. The mother couldn't accept that her daughter was gone. Luke comforted Judy's and called emergency services. Soon after, the police also arrived at the scene and they were extremely shocked by this discovery. It was a literal bloodbath. Such violence had never occurred in this previously quiet area. Who could commit such a cruel act against a girl? The injuries of Jody resembled those of Elizabeth Short, who was murdered in 1947 in Los Angeles. The girl's body was not only cut in half, but her internal organs were removed. Additionally, on her face was a Glasgow smile, which is a knife cup that extends from one ear to the other. This case is one of the most famous yet to be solved. Due to the similarity of injuries, so the case of the murdered Jody Jones was dubbed Black Scotland by some media outlets. This gruesome incident caused widespread panic among residents of both communities. Locals fear that a vicious maniac has appeared in the area and expect new attacks. To calm the public, police needed to urgently solve the case and incarcerate the dangerous criminal before he struck again. The specially trained dog amazed everyone by leading the search party straight to the body. The girl was found in a hidden spot, known only to her, under a tree, where her and a friend's initials were carved. Some witnesses believed this was not a coincidence but a clue. Jody's body had numerous cuts and stab wounds, primarily on her chest, neck, and head. Her arms had many cuts, indicating she actively tried to defend herself. Her neck was so damaged she was nearly decapitated. She was also severely beaten, with her hair pulled out. The girl was raped, and she died from strangulation. Forensic experts investigated the crime scene and discovered a used condom, along with DNA samples from 3 men on Jody's body. These samples were sent to the lab for analysis. Despite public concerns about a serial killer, the police believed the murder was personal, and Jody was not a random victim. Naturally, suspicion fell on her boyfriend, Luke, whom she was supposed to meet. Typically, those close to the victim are involved in such cases. It was believed that Luke might have been the last person to see her. His calm demeanor and indifference to Jody not meeting him as planned raised eyebrows. Why didn't he call or look for her? Perhaps because he already knew she was dead. Luke was considered suspicious by the police, so they decided to investigate him. Although he had no visible injuries, the numerous defensive wounds on Jody suggested she must have left marks on him. His face and body would likely have been scratched. Jody's mother, Judy, noted that her daughter's rebellious behavior began after meeting Luke, and she blamed him for everything, from her daughter's change in style to her daughter's murder. She claimed that Luke's negative influence had drastically changed her daughter. During that time, Jody behaved so recklessly that she had to be put under house arrest. At school, in addition to her behavioral changes, she experimented with illegal substances. Jody's mother, Judy, believed Luke was directly linked to these issues. Judy also argued that the dog didn't lead Luke to the body. She said he knew the location and led the dog straight to the crime scene. She opposed Luke so strongly that she asked him not to attend the funeral, partly to avoid media attention, as his presence at the service would have drawn interest from local newspapers. Rumors spread rapidly, and by the next day, the whole school knew what had happened. There were claims that Luke was involved in the brutal murder. Luke was known for being eccentric and called himself the town madman, but his oddities were never violent. Police suspect Luke is the one who killed Jody, so they obtained a search warrant for his home to gather evidence and bring charges against him. While searching his room, detectives came across a peculiar picture in numerous bottles filled with urine. They didn't understand why he filled them and kept them at home. He did not provide any explanation for this. And this is just one of many strange things police discovered in his home during their investigation. His home was filled with satanic symbols, and he was notably obsessed with the singer Marilyn Manson. From the point of view of the investigation, all of this is not in the suspect's favor. However, Could such eccentricities really indicate he was capable of a violent crime? In spite of his peculiar behavior, Luke denied any involvement in the crime. From the moment the police expressed their suspicions, he insisted that he loved Jodi and could never harm her. During his discussion with investigators, he mentioned a hair clip, and this raised suspicion as the hairpin was not seen when her body was discovered. Furthermore, his description of her clothing suggested he saw her later in the day, contradicting his claim that he hadn't seen her after school. According to him, she had different clothes and a hair clip at school, which didn't align with his story. The DNA on the used condom did not match Luke's. However, Luke's DNA was found on Jodi's bra among other unidentified samples. The police did not have enough evidence to charge him, but he was still the main suspect in the murder investigation and was called in for questioning. Investigators also spoke with his parents. Local residents' opinion of him turned very negative, and teachers at the school tried to isolate him from other students out of safety concerns but were unsuccessful. After 2 months, Luke returned to his class, not wanting to study separately. Consequently, the school administration had to suspend Luke from classes for the duration of the investigation. For the next 10 months, Luke remained the sole suspect. The police focused exclusively on him and did not consider other potential suspects. Ultimately, based on circumstantial evidence, Luke, 15 years old, was arrested for the murder of 14-year-old Jodi Jones. He also faced charges for possessing and carrying a knife in a school setting. One of the challenges in the investigation, besides the lack of evidence, was determining the motive for the murder. The police faced an issue because Luke was below the age of criminal responsibility. Later, it was revealed that the police committed several violations. Specifically, they were criticized for interrogating the 15-year-old without any adults present, such as his legal guardians or parents, and without a lawyer. The boy was pressured and forced to confess. During this time, law enforcement was more focused on building the case and finding evidence of Luke's guilt. They visited his home again and conducted another search of his room. His house was searched 3 times in total. Surprisingly, no blood was found in the house. However, many suspicious items were discovered and later used to accuse him of a brutal crime. Among these items, investigators confiscated a large number of Marilyn Manson CDs and copies of Manson's film Doppelhörs. A particular 10-minute scene in the film, where the main character committed a brutal crime against a black dahlia, was of great interest. Many drew parallels between the film and the real tragedy, leading to the belief that Luke was simply imitating his idols. Investigators suspected that Luke might have timed the massacre to coincide with a cult or ritual inspired by his favorite rock bands. He was eventually arrested, bringing relief to the city's residents, who viewed him as a murderer, Satanist, and psychopath, posing a danger to society. His eccentricities were publicly scrutinized, although they had not harmed anyone, until Jodi's murder. Rumors and sensational stories quickly spread. The case was heard in the Supreme Court of Edinburgh. However, Luke denied any involvement in Jodi's death. The prosecution argued that he was guilty of killing his girlfriend Jodi, pointing out that he discovered her body, even though he used a specially trained dog. Jodi's mother claimed that he brought the dog himself. Additionally, a witness reported seeing a man resembling Luke in a khaki jacket with Jodi near the crime scene, hugging, around the time before she passed away. However, this testimony has caused much controversy, as other witnesses reported seeing 2 men, and the witness ultimately could not positively identify Luke. At the trial, Luke's ex-girlfriend testified that he once threatened her with a knife, which frightened her greatly. However, he claimed he had an alibi, but it was unreliable. Luke's brother stated that on the day of the incident, he was alone in the house watching TV. However, their mother, Corinne, said she was at home with Luke at that time, and the brother was just in his room and mistaken. Despite this, The brother insisted he was alone, watching adult films, which he only did when no one else was home. Eventually, Corinne admitted she had lied, and Luke was indeed not at home. They faced consequences for this, and she was even held accountable. So, where was Luke? He never revealed his whereabouts, and it was impossible to track his phone. The prosecution presented a reconstruction of the events. According to the prosecutor, Luke and Jody met near a tree with their initials a little after 5 p.m. About 50 minutes later, he was seen alone. The prosecution claimed that he was fascinated by the story of the Black Dahlia and had watched a film of the same name, which included a disturbing scene of a massacre. Witnesses mentioned that he occasionally smoked a pipe. Then, he allegedly contemplated acting out something he saw in the film and harmed Jody. It was also revealed that he accused possessed a small case containing a knife, engraved with Jody's initials and her birth and death years. The case also had a note stating that the best day of he was the one that never came, a quote from Kurt Cobain, who was his idol. While none of this directly proves a crime, but the prosecution interpreted these details as suspicious coincidences, all pointing to he. The prosecutor's office believed Jody had been killed with a particular knife, but the knife vanished and couldn't be found for comparison. Luke couldn't explain its disappearance. Neighbors of Luke testified during the trial that on the evening of Jody's death, Luke burned something in his backyard. The prosecution suspected that this was how he disposed of the clothes he wore during the crime. Witnesses mentioned that the fire had a strange odor. However, when police searched his house, they found nothing significant. They did confiscate a large steel barrel used for burning garbage. In total, 122 items were confiscated in connection to the case. Notably, a new khaki jacket which a witness had seen disappeared from Luke's house. The prosecutor suggested that he burned it to hide blood stains. The jacket, purchased by his mother shortly before the murder, was last seen on him that day and then mysteriously vanished, raising further suspicions. A witness, a friend of Luke, testified at the trial. He claimed to have had a strange conversation with Luke shortly before the murder. Luke allegedly said that the best way to kill someone was by cutting their throat and mentioned that Luke could imagine killing someone. That day, Luke was texting Jody, with their last message exchange occurring between 16:35 and 16:54. After 1700 hours, Luke called the information service to ask for the exact time. This was puzzling because if he was at home, as claimed, he could have just checked his watch. The lawyers argued that there was no evidence against Luke. Besides Luke's DNA from 2 other men was found at the crime scene. But only one was identified. It belonged to a friend of Janine. The prosecution suggested that these traces were present because Jody wore Janine's shirt. Luke's DNA was on her bras, and her DNA was on his pants, but since they were in an intimate relationship, the presence of their DNA on each other's clothes was considered irrelevant to the murder case. The defense contended that Luke was eccentric, a fact he didn't deny. Yes, he was a rude teenager interested in strange things, but none of these were direct indicators of guilt. The lawyers attempted to demonstrate that he couldn't have committed the crime against his girlfriend. The numerous stab wounds to the throat nearly detached her head from her body. Forensic experts counted about 20 wounds in the neck area alone, while Jody fought back desperately. Luke would have certainly sustained defensive marks, yet no witnesses or police officers noticed any on him during the search. There were no scratches on his face or body. The lawyers argued that he didn't have a motive for murder. He loved his girlfriend and valued their relationship. Why would he murder her, especially on a day when all restrictions imposed by her mother were lifted? They shared a serious romantic relationship filled with tender feelings and rarely argued. It just didn't make sense. The case was highly controversial, ultimately left for the jury to decide. On January 20, 2005, the jury began their deliberation. After about 5 hours, they concluded that Luke was guilty of first-degree murder. On February 11th, the verdict stated that the 16-year-old would face at least 20 years in prison before eligibility for parole. However, many still doubted his involvement, believing that 2 people were involved in the murder. This thing allowed he to file several appeals, which were denied. Luke's mother had to sell their house and buy a smaller one to afford the legal fees. She fully supports her son and believes in his innocence. In 2019, a fund was established to raise money to support a man named Luke and to file new appeals on his behalf. However, the site hosting the fund eventually blocked it because it violated the site's terms. Despite these setbacks, Luke remained determined. Since 2003, when he was first accused of killing his girlfriend, he has consistently denied involvement. He made it clear that even if he were offered release in exchange for a confession, he would not accept it because he would never harm Jodi, his girlfriend. Luke had numerous supporters who, after hearing the guilty verdict in court, distributed flyers throughout the city proclaiming his innocence. So strong was their support that they even considered storming the prison. Their aim was to highlight what they believed to be Luke's wrongful conviction. However, their approach was questionable. Such actions could potentially harm Luke's case, and they also negatively impacted the Jones family, who were unjustly blamed for the situation and even received threats. In May 2007, the controversial trial resulted in the creation of a documentary about the case, which renewed interest in Luke's case. Moreover, this film revealed numerous irregularities committed by the police in charge of the investigation. Initially, the police considered Luke innocent, although they investigated him as a suspect. However, as more was learned about him, they found unconventional and unknown aspects. Most of the townspeople had a clearly negative opinion. Amid rumors and the extraordinary behavior of the town's eccentric, the investigation ceased to consider other people as suspects. All the evidence was circumstantial. Even Jodi's wounds, initially believed to resemble movie cuts, did not match so much. In fact, it was even questioned whether Luke was really a fan of Satanism and Marilyn Manson. He just followed some unpopular trends of his teenage years. To prove his innocence, Luke agreed to take a polygraph test on April 25, 2012. He passed the test successfully. 2 months later, the mother of he also underwent the polygraph test, and experts confirmed that both passed flawlessly. The documentary explored a theory that the murder might have been committed by a student who had written an essay about the murder of a girl in the woods a few weeks before Jodi's death. A friend of this student saw him shortly after the crime and noticed scratches on his face. Luke's family believes the investigation overlooked a crucial piece of evidence: condoms containing unknown male DNA. No DNA from Luke was found. They argue that the motive for the murder was rape, with the rapist attacking she and dragging her into the woods. They feel the investigation should focus more on this angle. Additionally, they claimed that when Jodi's mother came to Luke's house, he had not yet showered, yet there was no blood on him. They argue that if he were the killer, he would have showered and changed clothes immediately to wash off any blood. Years ago, the crime scene was vandalized with red graffiti referencing Jodi's murder. The message included a different name, suggesting that another person might be the murderer. This graffiti is believed to have been painted by Luke's supporters to assert his innocence. Luke's family hired 2 private detectives who identified several suspects, with Mark Kane among them. Mark was a local drug addict who died suddenly in May 2018 at age 38. Witnesses saw him at the crime scene on the day of the murder, with a scratched face and known to carry a knife. He claimed the scratches were from falling into bushes, but no one believed him given the context of Jodi's murder. However, despite his suspicious background, all suspects, including Mark, were eventually interrogated and cleared from the list. The family of Jody is certain that the person who killed their daughter is Luke, the one currently in prison. They have no doubt about his guilt. Meanwhile, Luke's family continues their pursuit of justice. Almost 2 decades have passed since his imprisonment, and his legal team has accused investigators of multiple violations, notably the absence of forensic analysis on several DNA samples from Jody, particularly those related to allegations of rape. This significant oversight has cast doubt on the conviction. Luke's lawyers are determined to overturn the sentence. Now 35 years old, Luke might be eligible for parole in 2025. However, he reportedly failed a random test this year. By regulation, after this point, the opportunity for parole will be postponed for another 3 years. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of affair Elodie Kulik. At around midnight on January 11, 2002, the French Rescue Service received a heartbreaking call. A woman, her voice panicked, screamed that she had been kidnapped. Other voices could be heard in the background before the noise increased, and the attackers took over the phone, cutting off the call forever. The call left the rescue service extremely worried, but the operators were unable to gather any useful information. Attempts to call the number back were unsuccessful as it was either out of coverage or switched off. The situation led to an investigation into one of the most unusual crimes the police had ever encountered. They had no information, not even the name of the caller. The only option was to investigate the mobile phone number, but at the time, the technology could not accurately track the caller's location, so the technology was of no help. In the early morning hours of January 11, 2002, at around 7 a.m., a random driver in the rural area of Picardy made a disturbing discovery. He noticed a car that appeared to have been abandoned in a ditch, with damage to the vehicle and the passenger door open. Concerned that the car had been stolen and abandoned, he called the police. When asked if anyone else was nearby, he replied that there was no one around. After making the call, he continued on his way. Since it was a remote area, it took some time for the police to arrive, and they arrived at the scene around 8 a.m. A Peugeot 106 was found upside down in a ditch, which seemed unusual as there was a clear and safe stretch of highway nearby, making it unlikely that it had ended up there by accident. There were no signs of braking or skidding on the road, suggesting the car had intentionally left the sidewalk at a high rate of speed. The keys were still in the ignition, but there was no sign of the driver or any passengers. Police used the license plate to identify the owner. Affair Elodie Kulik, a 24-year-old bank employee who lived nearby. While investigating the abandoned car, her bag was discovered inside, raising concerns for police. The bag contained her money, cards, and keys, but she had disappeared without a trace. Police went to the bank where the affair worked. Bank employees told them she had not shown up for work that day. They then contacted the local hospital, but there were no reports of any victims matching Affair's description. That morning, Affair's father contacted the police to report her absence. He explained that he had tried calling her cell phone, but she did not answer and did not make contact, which was very unusual for her. Normally, if she had any problems, she would always notify her family if she would be late or unable to come home. However, this time, she did not respond and it appeared that she had disappeared. Police began searching the area where her car was found and decided to release a photo to raise public awareness of her disappearance. On the morning of Saturday, January 12, 2002, a worker from a nearby farm went to a landfill 12 kilometers from the station. In the distance, he saw what he initially thought was a tree trunk. However, as he got closer, he was horrified to discover the disfigured body of a woman. He quickly called the police to report his horrific discovery. When the officers arrived at the scene, they were confronted with a horrifying sight: the partially burned and disfigured body of a young woman, showing clear signs of a violent death. Tests are needed to confirm the identity of the body. The body was discovered nearly 6 kilometers away from where her car was found the previous day, which was unusual. Police noted that this area is not frequented by many visitors. It is isolated and not a tourist destination. This suggests that the suspect is likely a local resident. The crime scene was secured and thoroughly searched for evidence. The gendarme discovered a fresh cigarette, but that may have been discarded by the potential killer. Additionally, a condom containing male fluid was located next to the body. Police focused on finding tire tread marks from any vehicle that might have brought the affair to this location, but they were unsuccessful in locating any. All collected evidence was sent to forensic scientists for analysis. On January 12, the police contacted Affair's parents to inform them of the sad news. When the family learned of the incident, the parents were devastated by their daughter's death. Overwhelmed with grief, the mother attempted to end her life. She survived but fell into a coma, remaining in that state for years until her death in 2011. The desperate father was determined to find his daughter's killer. Affair was a highly intelligent and educated young woman. She studied law in northern France and later returned to her hometown of Péronne. At just 23, she was offered a position at a bank, where she excelled and quickly became the youngest director in the bank's history. She took great pride in her career accomplishments. In addition to her career success, Affair was also very beautiful, with blonde hair and blue eyes. The forensic examination of Affair's car determined that it was traveling at a low speed. There were no signs of collision with another vehicle, raising the possibility that someone inside the car might have deliberately driven it into the ditch. When police checked Affair's mobile phone, they found a call to the local rescue service shortly after midnight. The call ended suddenly after she managed to scream. Police retrieved a 26-second recording filled with noise and unidentified male voices. While this recording did not provide clear evidence, it was notable because it indicated male involvement during the incident. The autopsy results showed that Affair died painfully from strangulation, and DNA evidence indicated that she had been raped. However, this DNA did not match any profiles in the database, suggesting her attacker had no prior criminal history. Police believed that the suspect's careless handling of the DNA would eventually lead him to reveal himself again. However, this assumption raised concerns, as it could result in another victim, so they could not afford to wait. Police organized street patrols and collected DNA samples from all male acquaintances of the affair. If these efforts did not lead to results, the search would expand to the surrounding area near the crime scene. The instincts of the gendarmes proved correct. Just 10 days after finding Affair's body, a police commissioner from another precinct arrested a man named Kirill, who had a history of sexual violence. He was in the area on the night of the disappearance and later attacked another woman, who reported the incident. While Kirill admitted to harassing this woman, claiming it was just harmless flirting, he denied any involvement in Affair's murder. The investigation of Kirill involved checking his car, which had scratches containing gray paint. This paint matched the color of the Peugeot 106 driven by Affair. DNA samples were taken from Kirill for comparison. However, the analysis showed that the paint did not match Affair's car, and Kirill's DNA did not match any evidence from the crime scene. As a result, Kirill was released, and further inquiries into Affair's acquaintances did not produce any new leads. The case has no prime suspect and no new leads. It seems the investigation has reached a dead end. Meanwhile, Affair's grieving father Jackie remains closely involved in the investigation and begins his own investigations. In order to quickly find the culprit, he ensures that the case is widely reported in the media, hoping that this will lead to new leads. On April 15, 2002, 3 months after Affair's body was discovered, new clues emerged in the case. The police received a detailed report from audio experts who had analyzed the recording of Affair's last call to emergency services. The experts carefully filtered out the background noise and identified two distinct male voices among the cries for help. One voice was calm and tried to reassure the victim, while the other, more aggressive, argued that she needed to be killed. They noted that the attackers had a heavy accent typical of an area called Picard, which happened to be close to where Affair's body was found. However, this information did not make the police's task any easier. They still lacked data, and the search for a new suspect was slow, with the assumption that two men were involved. After 6 months of unproductive investigation, the police department received a call from a farmer in Turtree. On July 8, 2002, he reported discovering a young girl's body on a haystack while heading to work. The shocking scene also revealed another mutilated body. Forensic experts, horrified by the brutality, noted that her limbs were dislocated and her body showed signs of having been run over by a vehicle. This location was only 30 kilometers away from where Affair had previously been found. The victim was identified as Patricia, a clerk who was known for riding her bicycle. She had gone missing just days before the farmer's discovery. Notably, similar items were found at this crime scene. Patricia was recognized as a beautiful girl who worked in a restaurant in Alberta. It was clear to police that these cases were linked, as such violent incidents had never occurred in this previously peaceful area. Witnesses who saw Patricia shortly before her death reported that a black sedan was following her bicycle on the street. At the time, they did not think much of it. Unfortunately, this was all the information the police could gather. The witnesses could not remember the car's make, model, or license plate. However, the police believed this crime was connected to a previous case, and new information about the black sedan helped narrow down the search. The media quickly picked up the story, increasing public fear and spreading rumors about a possible serial killer. The police's struggle to solve the case led to the discovery of a third body on August 21, 2002. In Villa-Brentoni, a van was found abandoned near the railroad tracks. And inside it, police discovered a third young girl who had been wounded by a bladed weapon and died from internal bleeding. Unlike the earlier victims, this girl's identity was unknown because no one had reported her missing. The police spoke with local residents and learned about the parents of a daughter who had not returned home the night before. They thought she was out with friends. Upon investigation, they recognized the victim as their 18-year-old daughter, Crestel. She was killed approximately 40 kilometers from where the first victim was found. In just 7 months, the gendarmes encountered 3 similar murders of young girls, each caught by the criminals at night on roads between settlements. The locations of these crimes on the map created a triangle that the media called the Triangle of Death. This situation caused public anxiety to escalate, leading residents to hold a memorial procession to express their fear for safety. Even with more police patrols and checkpoints, attempts to gather new evidence and testimonies from other potential victims were unsuccessful. However, by the end of November 2002, the investigation into the second Patricia victim's murder produced new leads. DNA found on the victim's clothing identified a suspect named Jean-Paul Conti, marking an important breakthrough for the police. Police arrived to question Conti, a man who had served 17 years in prison for a series of rapes. When he saw the police, he was very surprised. He remained calm and did not attract the attention of those around him. His home was located in the Triangle of Death, which included the locations where the 3 victims were found. Conti was arrested in the early morning of November 25th, but police needed more evidence to link him to the murders. His DNA was only found on the clothing of the second victim, and there were no traces on the first and third victims. The investigation later determined that he was only involved in the murders of the second and third victims, resulting in a life sentence. In addition, it was confirmed that he could not have been involved in the murder of Affair. as he was in prison at the time. This indicates that the cases of Affair and the other victims are unrelated, revealing that there are at least 2 killers operating in the area, targeting young girls. The investigation resumed with meticulous efforts to identify all mobile devices that may have been in the vicinity where the body and a gray Peugeot 106 were discovered. A total of 14,000 signals were recorded and needed analysis. Specialists undertook a massive task that included reviewing over 600 sent messages, listening to more than 10,000 conversations, collecting 5,500 DNA samples from found mobile phones, and conducting thousands of interviews. Police examined over 500 theories related to the crime, but none provided any leads. The department received numerous anonymous letters identifying various individuals as potential killers. Police followed up on these leads, which consumed a lot of resources, but ultimately did not advance the case. After a lengthy period, police offered a reward of €60,000 for information leading to the capture of the real criminal. However, this also failed to yield results, leaving the police at a standstill. 9 years after Affair's body was discovered, a new police officer joined the investigation. He was a young specialist with a fresh perspective and new skills. He suggested a method that focuses on analyzing the DNA found at the crime scene to search for close relatives of the DNA's owner, rather than just the owner themselves. This innovative technique was used for the first time in France in this case and proved to be a significant breakthrough in the investigation. Progress was made in November 2011 when police identified a relative of the killer. Evidence strongly suggested that the killer was part of the Wired family. It was believed that the elderly man was not involved, meaning that the perpetrator was likely his son. The Wired family had lived in the area for nearly 50 years and their son, Gregory Wired, was a 23-year-old plumber at the time of the murder. To protect the information, police kept his identity a secret for several weeks. However, they were disappointed to discover that Gregory Wired had died in a traffic accident shortly after the Affair murder in November 2003, which was officially ruled a fatal accident. The Gregory's death shortly after Affair's murder explained why his DNA was not found during random sampling of local residents from 2002 to 2010. His profile closely matched the description of the criminal. Gregory, known to his friends as a motorsport racing enthusiast, was cheerful but had a violent streak. He abused alcohol and often lost control when intoxicated, making him prone to aggression. To conduct a DNA examination of the suspect, authorities decided to exhume his body from the cemetery for testing. The results revealed a complete match, identifying one of the killers. The next step for the gendarmerie was to find the owner of the second voice from Affair's last call recording. They began by investigating Gregory's immediate circle. The police aimed not only to piece together the events, but also to ensure that no further threats existed for other young women. While only traces of Gregory were found on the condom at the crime scene, another male voice was clearly captured on the recording. Police then investigated Willie Bardon, a former plumber and bartender who was a close friend of Gregory's. They had many interests in common, and a recording confirmed that it was his voice. Willie lived nearby, and police knew of his past allegations of violence against women, although those incidents did not result in legal action. Witnesses reported that he had chased them in his car. Despite his troubled past, he had no criminal record, which meant that his DNA was not in the police database. He vehemently denied any involvement in the crime and claimed that the police were mistaken. Ultimately, his DNA was not found at the crime scene. In late March 2013, Gregory's ex-girlfriend assisted police in identifying the voices of Gregory and Willie by listening to a recorded phone call. Willie, who had a recognizable accent, was recognized by people who knew him. Despite this evidence, Willie denied any involvement in Affair's death, maintaining his innocence. Some described him as a kind man, a caring husband and father, while others painted a different picture, noting his impulsive behavior extramarital affairs, alcohol abuse, and repeated advances toward women. Nevertheless, the case against him went to court. The prosecution's case rested largely on the identification of Gregory's girlfriend's voice and several others. Despite the lack of substantial evidence, the court ruled in favor of the prosecution. In 2019, 45-year-old Willie Bardon was convicted of gang rape, kidnapping, and murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison. While in custody, he attempted to end his life to prove his innocence. His lawyers quickly filed an appeal, and which was accepted. They argued that the voice on the crucial recording belonged to someone else. Experts analyzed the recording but could not confirm whether it was actually his voice, as it was unclear and discontinuous. This uncertainty raised doubts about the evidence against him. As a result, his conviction was appealed and Willie was acquitted due to insufficient evidence. He was released from prison on September 25, 2020. The story continues. A new trial began, and on July 1, 2021, Willie was convicted again and sentenced to 30 years in prison. His attorney appealed the decision, but the appeal was rejected. The defense team expressed their commitment to doing everything possible to free this innocent man, but he remains in. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sophia Urrutia. The Urrutia family lived in Canning Vale, a suburb of Perth with about 35,000 residents. The family included 7 members and a dog. The children were Isabel, the youngest at 3 years old, Sophia, who was 8, Ines, 11, and Gabriel, who was 14. The parents, though busy with work, maintained a close relationship with their children and treated them well. Josephine, the mother, was a loving and caring woman who worked hard to provide comfort for her family and manage the household. Caring for children from toddler to teenager is a challenging task because the needs of children at each stage are different. The father often had to go on business trips to Hong Kong, resulting in frequent absences from home. 8-year-old Sophia Urrutia, a girl attending a Catholic elementary school where she was loved by all her classmates and teachers. Sophia was well-mannered, naturally tactful, inquisitive. She helped her mother and took care of her younger sister. Sophia had many hobbies, including painting and dancing. Her uncle, who lived with them, often helped with the children and frequently took them on outings. On June 26, 2006, the kids eagerly await a trip to the mall. Little do they know that a dangerous force is also at work there. It was a regular weekday. The uncle picked up the children after school, and they went to the local shopping center, Leamington. It was a small shopping area, but it had everything local residents needed. 3 children were with their uncle, 14-year-old Gabriel, 11-year-old Ines, and 8-year-old Sophia. During their walk, Sophia excitedly shared that she had been chosen to perform an interesting Indonesian dance. She was thrilled and proud, and her uncle and siblings praised her. While at the shopping center, Sophia needed to use the restroom and informed them at the checkout. Being familiar with the shopping center, her uncle allowed her to go alone while they finished unpacking and paying for their items. The restroom wasn't far, and Sophia ran off by herself. The uncle watched her until she entered the restroom, not realizing it would be the last time he saw her alive. After paying, they left the store and went to wait for Sophia outside the restroom, but she took longer than expected. Concerned, the uncle moved closer to call out to her, but there was no response. He didn't enter the women's restroom, so he sent Gabriel and Ines to check both the women's and men's restrooms. Ines knocked on the women's door, but there was no answer. Gabriel checked the men's restroom, but it was silent. They also tried the nearby disabled restroom, where they heard some noise, but a male voice responded that it was occupied, scaring them away. Worried, Gabriel and Ines thought Sophia might have exited through another door, possibly heading to a restaurant or becoming lost in the shopping center. Sophia's uncle waited in the hallway while the rest searched for her around the shopping center. After 10 minutes, Gabriel couldn't wait any longer and went back to the toilets to call out to her, thinking she hadn't heard him. As he approached the disabled toilet, the door suddenly swung open. A tough-looking guy, about 20 years old, emerged. Their eyes met briefly, and Gabriel instinctively felt something was wrong. Gabriel immediately noticed Sophia's discarded school uniform in the waste bin. He moved closer and saw a lifeless, naked body on the floor. By then, the guy had already run down the corridor and was out of sight. Gabriel rushed to Sophia, but she showed no signs of life. He began to scream in the toilet. The uncle and the other children who were with Sophia at the mall that day quickly arrived at the scene. The police were called immediately, and mall security was notified. The entire mall was closed. Top doctors confirmed the girl's death. They couldn't save her. Forensic experts sealed the toilet and began examining the crime scene to ensure no important evidence was damaged or lost. Gabriel, who witnessed the criminal, was able to describe him, prompting police to search the mall for the suspicious man who had emerged from the handicapped restroom. During their initial search, the police could not locate him within the premises and assumed he had already escaped. The public was shocked by the brutal crime that had taken place. In what seemed like a safe, quiet place, no one imagined that letting a child go to the toilet could result in losing them forever. This murder would later be deemed the most brutal in Western Australia's history due to the horrific nature of the crime and Sophia's injuries. Unfortunately, the CCTV cameras in the corridor were not working that day. At the time, detectives only had a description provided by Gabriel, which was clearly insufficient. The crime was committed with horrifying brutality. The child, Sophia, died from suffocation. The attacker not only cut off her air supply but also squeezed her neck so forcefully that her larynx was completely crushed. Her arms were dislocated, and she suffered severe injuries and ruptures due to forced sexual assault. The forensic expert concluded that the attack lasted about 5 minutes, during which the attacker brutally harmed she. Even the most seasoned detectives, who regularly deal with various crimes, also described the case as the most serious they had ever encountered. Sophia had no reason to use the disabled toilet. It was possible that she was quickly dragged inside by someone. The criminal was probably already inside, waiting for a victim, and Sophia was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, becoming an unintended victim. She was seized so suddenly that she didn't have time to scream. The attacker immediately began strangling her. She stood no chance against an adult man and couldn't even call for help, even though her relatives were nearby and heard nothing. Investigators began compiling a list of all sex offenders in the area and questioned shopping center employees using a portrait of the suspect. It was urgent to find the criminal because panic was spreading throughout the city. People were terrified by the brutal attack on a young girl and were afraid to go outside. Several shopping center employees recognized the man in the portrait as 21 years old Dante Wyndham Arthurs. He is fat, looks very pale, and worked as a packer of vegetables and fruits at one of the stores in the shopping center. On the day of the incident, Dante was on shift but then disappeared. The police became interested in him and checked his criminal history. They discovered that 3 years prior to this murder, he had been arrested for sexually assaulting another 8-year-old girl. At that time, the police lacked sufficient evidence to charge him, so he was released. Early the next morning, around 5 o'clock, detectives, knowing Dante's address, went to his home, where he lived with his parents, just a short distance from the shopping center. They interrogated Dante and searched his residence. During the search, investigators discovered a sports bag containing latex gloves, handcuffs, rope, a knife, and several photographs with personal information. The oldest girl in the photos was 15 years old, and the others were younger. Some photos included details such as names, ages, home addresses, and the shortest routes to reach them using public transport, suggesting he was stalking these girls and planning attacks. However, Sophia was not among these photos. Within hours, Dante was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, as well as sexual assault and forcible detention of Sophia. Dante Wyndham Arthurs was born on August 8, 1984, in Western Australia. His family soon moved to the UK, where they lived for 8 years before returning to Australia. As a teenager, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a condition marked by difficulties with social communication and repetitive, obsessive behavior. During questioning, he neither confirmed nor denied his guilt and did not take the events seriously. He described the situation as if he were an outsider watching the horrific crime occur. He was unable to provide details or explain his motives, suggesting it felt as if the actions were not his own. Furthermore, Dante could not specify whether the sexual assault happened before or after the murder. This detail was crucial because, in Western Australia, sexual assault on a deceased person is not classified as a crime. He claimed his intent was to rape Sophia, but he never meant to kill anyone. Sophia's relatives were shocked by the police's negligence and blamed them for allowing the dangerous criminal to remain free. They pointed out that in 2003, investigators ignored crucial evidence that showed Dante was dangerous. If that evidence had been addressed and he had been held accountable, Sophia would not have encountered him in the restroom that day, and she would still be alive. It was revealed that Dante wasn't even listed among the most dangerous criminals prone. However, this was not Dante's second crime. In 2001, while on vacation with his family, Dante was arrested for sexually assaulting a young girl in another country. However, due to insufficient evidence, he was released, and no information about the incident was shared with the local police. Before Sophia's murder, Dante stalked at least 10 other girls. Later, the public began discussing new disturbing information about the murder of another child. This was the infamous case of 2-year-old James Bulger, brutally murdered on February 12, 1993. His mother had briefly left him unattended behind the door of a butcher's shop in a shopping center in Liverpool, UK. She didn't intend to stay long as she was just picking up an order, but there was a mix-up, delaying her return. When she came out, her son was missing. She immediately began searching and called the police. James's body was discovered 2 days later. A train had passed over him, but he had died beforehand. A forensic expert identified 42 injuries on James's body, including 10 skull fractures. Because of the numerous injuries, it was impossible to determine which one caused his death. It was later discovered that James had been noticed by 2 9-year-old boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson, who had skipped school that day. They aimlessly wandered around the shopping center, committing several petty thefts. Upon seeing James, they decided to have some fun with him. They forcibly took him away and brutally assaulted him, hitting him with a 10-kilogram iron bar. They kicked, trampled, and threw bricks and stones at him and poured paint on his face. When they saw James was no longer moving, they dragged him to the railroad tracks and left him to die, hoping to disguise the murder as an accident. The crime was quickly solved thanks to CCTV footage from the shopping center, which showed James being taken away, leading to the arrest of John and Robert. They had previously attempted to kidnap another child in a shopping mall, but the mother quickly intervened and saved the child. It was found that after James left the shopping center, they were seen by 38 people along the way. Passers-by observed they forcefully dragging the child. They claimed that James was their younger brother, and they told others they were taking him to the police station because he was lost. No one intervened in the situation. Investigators suspect the crime was not sexual in nature since the child was not wearing underwear, but the examination could not confirm this for certain. Robert Thompson and John Venables denied any sexual abuse of James but were unable to clearly explain why they undressed the child. John and Robert were sentenced to imprisonment for an indefinite period, meaning they would remain in prison until authorities determined they were no longer a threat to society, with a minimum sentence of 10 years. However, due to public pressure, their minimum sentence was increased to 15 years in July 1994. In 1997, the House of Lords overturned this decision, reducing the minimum sentence back to 10 years. Consequently, they served only 8 years in prison and were released in June 2001. By their release, they had completed secondary and advanced level education. While in prison, they suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, with John frequently experiencing nightmares about James. Importantly, they were given new identities and guaranteed complete anonymity. Any publications revealing their new identities or showing their photographs were officially prohibited. The authorities believed they deserved a second chance at a normal life, and this measure was also taken for their safety, as it was feared that the public might harm them. The public was outraged by the lenient punishment and the protection of their identity. People wanted to know their names and whereabouts to avoid any potential danger. There was skepticism about their ability to reform, which proved justified. On March 2, 2010, John was sent back to prison for storing and distributing explicit photos of children. He received a 2-year sentence and was released in February 2018. Then, he to be charged again. John faced charges for possessing explicit child photos, leading to a 40-month prison sentence. There were reports that he might receive a new identity and undergo plastic surgery at the state's expense to keep his identity hidden, a move James's parents strongly opposed. In July 2019, UK authorities discussed the possibility of relocating him to Canada, Australia, or New Zealand, as maintaining his anonymity in the UK had become too costly. There is almost no information about Robert Thompson. The only known fact is that he was forbidden from communicating with John and was relocated. It is unknown whether he reformed or returned to crime like John. After the murder of Sofia Urrutia, many suspected that Dante, who killed Sofia in a restroom, was actually Robert Thompson with a new identity. He received help with relocation and confidentiality, and many details of their biographies matched. Dante lived in Great Britain for 8 years, coinciding with the time of James's murder. In both cases, the victims were found in a shopping center. It is believed there was a sexual motive, and the victims were of a similar age and appearance. However, this theory could not be confirmed. The police denied any connection. The public suspects the denial was due to confidentiality. Many continue to believe they are the same person and consider him very dangerous. The year after Sofia's murder in March, Dante did not plead guilty to any charges. Consequently, the police reduced the charge from premeditated murder to simple murder, which carries a lighter sentence. Additionally, the sexual assault charge was dropped due to the inability to prove it occurred before Sofia's death. This situation highlights the sometimes absurd nature of the Western Australian legal system. Detectives allegedly obtained a confession from Dante, but none of the interrogations were properly recorded, so they could not be used as evidence. At the trial, due to public pressure, Dante was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 13 years. However, he was able to reduce his time on parole. According to the laws at the time of his conviction, Dante was eligible for early release by 2019, with his case reviewed every 3 years. Each time, there is a chance for him to receive a pardon. The next review of Dante's case occurred in 2022, but it was decided to keep him in prison until at least 2025. The family of Sofia and the public hope that Dante, monster, remains incarcerated for life, seeing him as a danger to others. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Lisa Cecilia Harnum. On July 30, 2011, around 10:30 p.m., Unusual sounds resembling a woman's screams were heard from the balcony of the 15th floor of a luxury apartment building in Sydney, Australia. Witnesses, confused by the alarming noises, quickly rushed to the building's ground level. There, they discovered a girl's lifeless body who had fallen to her death. Her name was later identified as Lisa Cecilia Harnham. Moments later, a visibly distraught man exited the building, overwhelmed with shock and grief, suggesting it was a tragic accident. Lisa had a passion for dance from a young age and was actively involved in ballet as a teenager. She was well known for her sociable, confident, and energetic personality. In 2005, at the age of 24, Lisa loved to travel and gain new experiences. She grew up in the suburbs of Toronto, Canada. Lisa then moved to Australia. Lisa initially came to Australia on a 12-day working visa. However, she extended her stay by working at a hair and beauty salon in Sydney. The position suited Lisa well, as she had a passion for fashion, unique hairstyles, and the latest beauty trends. Despite being away from home, Lisa kept in touch with her family in Canada, regularly speaking to her mother. Lisa's family was also supportive of her decision to move and her desire to become an Australian citizen. In 2009, Lisa was looking for a new apartment, and a friend introduced her to a potential roommate, Simon Gattani, who was about 10 years older than her. Simon was a shoe importer, known for wearing expensive suits and living a typical lifestyle of successful Sydney businessmen. He and his business partner mainly imported luxury shoes from the United States and sold them online in Australia for a profit. Initially, Lisa told her mother that the accommodation arrangement was only temporary. She planned to stay with Simon while she continued to look for another place to live. Lisa assured her mother that there was nothing to worry about. Lisa moved into Simon's luxurious apartment on the 15th floor of a high-rise building in central Sydney. The apartment had large windows and a spacious balcony. After only 2 months of living together, they began a romantic relationship. Lisa told her mother that she and Simon were starting to date, and their relationship seemed to be progressing rapidly. As their relationship progressed, the couple grew closer and became more serious. On Lisa's 30th birthday in June 2011, Simon proposed to her in front of a large crowd at a restaurant, inviting his closest friends and family to witness the moment. However, just 6 weeks later, on the morning of July 30, 2011, Lisa locked herself in the bathroom of their shared home and called her mother in Canada. She pleaded with her mother to come to Australia and help her escape from Simon. John, her mother, agreed to take time off work to assist her daughter. Meanwhile, Lisa was nearly finished packing her suitcase. John advised her to hurry and take her bag and passport so she could leave the house quickly. On the morning of July 30, a young Japanese student was walking to Liverpool Street to catch a bus. He was waiting at the bus stop on the side of Hyde Park, across from the building where Simon and Lisa lived. While he was waiting, he heard a loud noise that caught his attention. He saw a body falling from the side of the building and a shirtless man standing on the balcony, looking down. Minutes later, Simon, dressed only in his pajamas, ran desperately out of the building toward Lisa's body. The police arrived quickly, but it was too late. Lisa had died in the fall. Her handbag was next to her, and she was fully clothed, except for one shoe, which had probably come off during the fall. In her pocket, there was a torn piece of paper. Surveillance cameras were installed outside, and at the time of Lisa's fall, there were also cameras operating in the apartment. These cameras recorded Simon, clearly distressed, as he ran out of the apartment. Simon returned to his apartment for a moment, and when he left again, the elevator arrived. Simon informed the police about how to operate the security system and cameras in the apartment, but did not mention the hard drive containing the recording from the time of the incident. By the time the police discovered the hard drive, it was gone. This footage could contain important evidence regarding the cause of Lisa's death. The only camera footage that could be obtained was from a camera pointed at the front door of Simon's apartment. The footage clearly shows Lisa trying to leave, followed by Simon pulling her back inside. This incident occurred before she fell. It is clear that a heated argument took place shortly before Lisa died. Simon also admitted that they had gotten into an argument. Neighbors reported hearing Lisa screaming and pleading for help. One neighbor said they heard a knock on the door, followed by silence. Simon explained to the police what had caused the argument. Lisa had told Simon that she had something to confess. According to Simon, they calmed down and agreed to discuss their problems in detail. Simon then went into the kitchen to make them tea. While in the kitchen, he asked Lisa again about the secret she wanted to tell. At that moment, Lisa ran out to the balcony and Simon followed her. Simon believed that Lisa was putting on a dramatic act to frighten him, which was typical of her behavior. In the past, she had done similar things, like opening the doors of a moving vehicle and threatening to jump out. On one occasion, she actually did jump out, but he was driving slowly at the time. Simon said she ran to the balcony. Unfortunately, Lisa lost her balance and fell off the balcony before she could react. Simon rushed to the edge of the balcony, trying to catch her, but it was too late. He shouted her name, and he attracted the attention of a young student standing below. At first, Simon's account seemed credible, but upon closer examination, some doubts arose about his account. Why would Lisa have carried the handbag if her intention was only to scare Simon? A key witness had observed the tragic incident that morning. Joshua, a witness, was walking in the park around 10 a.m. when he heard strange noises coming from the balcony on the 15th floor. He looked up and saw Simon standing there, shirtless, holding what appeared to be a black suitcase. Joshua watched as Simon took something out of the suitcase and threw it off the balcony. Although Joshua could not understand what Simon had thrown, he rushed over to find out what was going on. When he arrived, he saw a crowd of people trying to help a young woman. He then noticed Simon running towards the crowd. Joshua had previously seen Simon staring at Lisa's body from a distance for a long time before running down. Joshua was working as an editor for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation when he witnessed the incident. He continued to work, but when news of Lisa's death spread online, he realized he had witnessed it and contacted the police to tell them what he had seen. After investigation, the police discovered a letter that Lisa wrote to her mother. The content of the letter said that she thought she loved this man, but he controlled her life too much. In the letter, Lisa expressed that she missed her family and friends. Through the investigation, the police learned that Simon had convinced Lisa to quit her job at the beauty salon and stop attending fitness classes at the public gym. He controlled her daily life. Simon arranged for a personal trainer and set up a home gym for her. Simon even required Lisa to wear simple clothes so as not to attract attention. He asked her to tie her hair back and avoid wearing makeup. Unfortunately, the family only realized how isolated Lisa had become after her death. However, Simon saw their relationship differently. He stated that although he controlled their relationship, he believed it was filled with love and affection. The police later discovered a recording from Lisa's voice recorder just a month before her death. In this recording, Lisa was talking to Simon. She expressed that she only communicated with him and that her entire life revolved around him. She then cried and was confused about how her life had changed so drastically. In addition, the police also discovered that Simon had once written to Lisa, "You should never talk to or look at other men besides me. I have to be the only one for you." 6 weeks before Lisa died, she had shown clear signs that she wanted to end the relationship. Lisa had asked her fitness trainer to hold on to some of her belongings until she could get them back. On the morning of 30 July, Lisa locked herself in the bathroom and secretly called her mother. They agreed to meet in Sydney later. John said she had never realized how closely Simon had followed Lisa. Lisa had told John, her mother, that she found it strange that Simon always seemed to know where she was, but at the time, neither she nor her mother thought much of it. Lisa suspected that Simon was monitoring all of her calls, texts, and emails. In addition, he had installed surveillance cameras in their apartment to closely monitor her every move. A note found in her pocket revealed that she only discovered the existence of these cameras at the last minute. Through the footage, Simon learned about Lisa's intentions to leave him, her interactions with her coach, her conversations with her mother, and her plans to fly to Canada. Simon Gattani was charged with murder by police, and he was initially arrested but later released on bail. He pleaded not guilty in January 2012 and was released on bail until his trial began in November 2013. The media were not allowed inside the courtroom. A notable focus was Simon's new girlfriend, 23-year-old Rachel Louise. Her striking resemblance to Lisa attracted media attention and increased interest in the trial. Rachel has consistently shown her support for Simon throughout the trial, speaking out about his innocence whenever possible. She reportedly contributed about $85,000 of her own savings to pay for his defense attorney. The trial took place and lasted 4 weeks, starting on October 21, 2013. Simon's defense claimed that Lisa intended to jump over the railing due to her ongoing depression, but this explanation seemed unlikely. Material evidence could help clarify the situation. The balcony railing was 1.2 meters high, while Simon was only 1.65 meters tall, suggesting it would have been difficult for him to lift Lisa, who weighed about 50 kilograms, over the railing. Given Simon's age and build, could he have physically lifted and thrown Lisa off the balcony? Simon's brother Anthony attempted to recreate the scene to counter the prosecution's version of events. The reenactment showed that in order to throw Lisa over the railing, Simon would have needed to carry her a distance and maneuver around obstacles such as the treadmill and flower pots while struggling. This would have been nearly impossible without touching the railing. But when the police arrived, everything was intact. Surveillance camera footage from the building showed that the incident took place over the course of just a few minutes, which would not have been enough time to clean up the crime scene. According to Simon, Lisa fell from the balcony. If the couple had argued, there would likely have been evidence of a struggle on their bodies, but none was found. Neighbors reported hearing screaming in the hallway and near the apartment door for over a minute, suggesting that Lisa was unconscious or that the couple had chosen to resolve the argument amicably, although this is unlikely. The investigation found no signs of trauma other than those caused by Lisa's fall, suggesting that it was unlikely that she had been unconscious due to a head injury. It is also unclear how she would have been able to hold on to her bag if she had been unconscious. These points cast doubt on the testimony of the main witness, who claimed that Simon had deliberately killed Lisa. Joshua was the only person who witnessed the moments before Lisa fell, while the others only reported hearing some noises. Joshua, the international student closest to the incident, was facing the building when he heard a loud noise. He looked up but did not see what was causing it. Joshua described hearing loud, frantic screams. He initially thought the screams were someone arguing and throwing something from the balcony. When he looked up, he saw a shirtless man throwing what appeared to be a black sports bag or luggage from the 15th floor. In court, Joshua agreed with Simon's defense that the screams were heard shortly after he saw the man on the balcony. Joshua explained that this all happened in fractions of a second. When asked if his testimony could be inaccurate due to his distance from the crime scene and the timing, he acknowledged that it could be. The evidence suggests Simon is innocent, as it would be impossible to commit such an act in just a few minutes without leaving a mess. However, during the investigation, police uncovered Simon's past. He was first arrested for assault as a teenager in 1991 after a confrontation with his ex-girlfriend's employer. Simon allegedly harassed her at her workplace in a Sydney shopping center. Her employer decided to defend her, but after the fight, Simon brought a dozen friends with him and they attacked his ex-girlfriend's employer. Simon was later caught in a car with stolen goods when police arrived at his home after he failed to attend a scheduled court hearing. He attacked 2 police officers at the age of 20 and was charged with assaulting a police officer after biting off the officer's earlobe. Simon served 2 years in prison. However, he did not serve his full sentence and was released on bail. In the following years, he was arrested for supplying drugs and convicted in New South Wales, receiving a 3-year prison sentence. By the time Lisa had unwittingly moved in with him, Simon had started a women's footwear import business operating through a website, appearing to be a legitimate and successful businessman. The final trial lasted several hours before the judge delivered his verdict. The judge found Joshua's testimony to be credible. They found Simon's testimony unconvincing, suggesting he appeared to be acting rather than being sincere. The judge concluded that, although Simon had a coherent story, his account lacked the necessary details to be considered credible. When the jury returned a guilty verdict for murder, Simon's girlfriend Rachel shouted at the judge, "You're completely wrong," and left the courtroom in tears. She became the target of fierce criticism from the media in Australia and abroad for supporting Simon. Rachel later sued the Daily Telegraph over 3 articles that allegedly portrayed her as a prostitute. Rachel eventually won an undisclosed settlement from the Daily Telegraph and continued to maintain that Simon was not guilty of murder. The judge sentenced Simon Gittany, then 40, to 26 years in prison for the murder of Lisa Cecilia Harnham. He will be eligible for parole on 21 May 2031. Lisa's family traveled from Toronto to Sydney to attend the trial. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Anita Knutson. Anita Knutson, 18, had just finished her first year at Minot State University. She is intelligent, hardworking, and well-liked. She majored in education and aims to become a kindergarten teacher. Her family and friends believed this profession suited her perfectly because she loved working with young children. She often cared for the neighbors' kids. Anita shared an apartment near the university with a childhood friend. To help cover her tuition and living expenses without burdening her parents, she took on 2 jobs, one in retail and another at a local hotel. Despite her busy schedule, she maintains an active lifestyle and has many friends. In 2007, Anita was eagerly anticipating the summer break. She missed her home and family very much, although she regularly calls her parents and keeps in touch with her siblings. When her mother called on Saturday, June 3, she did not respond. She had a shift at the hotel that day, so her mother thought she might be busy or simply missed the call. However, on Sunday, not being able to contact Anita caused concern, especially since she did not show up for work. Worried, her father, Gordon, decided to travel to Maine to check on her. As Gordon approached the building where Anita lived, he noticed that the window of her room, located to the right of the front entrance, was broken. Getting closer, he saw a hunched figure of a girl sitting on the bed. Although her face was not visible from the window, but he recognized it was his daughter. He called her name, but when she didn't respond, he reached through the window to touch her. To his horror, he realized she was dead. Her body was cold. In a panic, he contacts the homeowner, Laura Knapp, and waits for her to unlock the door. Once inside the room, it is clearly too late to save Anita. The police were called to the scene and determined that Anita had been stabbed twice, once in the chest and once from the side. There were no other signs of injury or struggle. It was unclear whether she had been wearing a robe or if it had been thrown over her after she collapsed onto the bed following the attack. During the investigation, important evidence was found at the crime scene. including Anita's mobile phone and a folding knife covered in dried blood, which was discovered under the blankets on the bed beside the wall. Notably, several of Anita's valuables, such as cash, her laptop, and digital camera, remained untouched, shows that theft was not the motive for the attack. Investigators concluded that the window was not the entry point for the killer. Even though the window was left open and was wide enough for an adult to crawl through, a maintenance worker named Marty Annell found a window screen on the ground outside the previous night. The screen had been cut into the shape of a capital L. Marty had picked it up with a knife, intending to fix or replace it, but had forgotten about it until Gordon arrived the next day to check on his daughter. Marty later gave the cut screen to the police. Despite the damaged screen, investigators were not convinced there had been a break-in through the window. No evidence of entry was found, and the dusty windowsills, both inside and outside, were undisturbed. This suggests that mesh panel was cut after the murder, indicating the killer likely did not use the window to enter. It appeared the crime scene was staged, and the murderer probably used the door. When Gordon entered the apartment, he found the front door locked, which required a key to open and close. There were 4 individuals to have keys to the front door. One belonged to Anita, another was her roommate, Nicole Rice, who was away visiting parents for the weekend. The third belonged to the landlady, Laura Knapp, and the 4th person is the maintenance worker, Marty. Marty caught investigators off guard because he was the one who discovered the window grill. He claimed he did not see Anita on the bed next to the window when he picked up the screen from outside. However, Gordon said that as he approached the building, he could clearly see Anita through the window. Initial DNA tests on items such as a pocket knife and other areas of the room yielded no clues, suggesting that investigators would need to look for the killer using other methods. They began looking into Anita's personal life and eventually concluded that she had been murdered. Cell phone records and forensic analysis revealed that Anita was texting a friend, Michael Van, early on Sunday morning, more than a day before her body was found. The text indicated that Michael, who had a romantic interest in her, sent a message asking her to reply to his previous message. However, Anita replied that she didn't know what to say. Their exchange was personal, but not flirtatious. The last text from him arrived on Anita's phone at 4:53. It turned out that Michael wanted more than just friendship, but friends stated that the two only communicated platonically. Michael isn't the only one who wants to date Anita. Tyler Schmaltz, a college student, he is shy and awkward, also has feelings for her. He admitted to having few friends, and Anita was one of the few who showed him kindness. They attended prom together in high school, but their relationship never turned romantic. Tyler admitted during a police interview that although he had long liked Anita, that did not stop him from being close friends with her. In fact, he even moved to the same apartment complex to be nearer to her. After the crime, Anita's family found Tyler's behavior unusual. He lingered in the cordoned-off area for an extended period, frequently reaching out to the police for updates. He even created a 20-minute video in memory of Anita and shared it online. Additionally, he organized and took part in fundraisers to cover advertising costs for information related to the investigation. He was questioned multiple times by detectives, and his DNA and fingerprints were collected and compared to those found at the crime scene, but there were no matches. Shortly after Anita was found, a witness reported seeing a man running away from the crime scene around the time of her murder. The police shared a description of this man and attempted to locate him. A local resident came forward, stating that he regularly jogged along that route at the same time. However, this lead was eventually set aside. Meanwhile, a construction crew working in the adjacent building had a clear view of Anita's apartment complex. DNA samples were collected from all the workers, and none matched the evidence. Investigators interviewed people close to Anita, including her close friend and roommate, Nicole Rice. The two had been friends since high school and were very close at the time. Nicole insists their friendship is still good and disagreements between them were only minor. In contrast, those who knew Anita described their relationship differently, suggesting that they argued frequently. Anita's father, Gordon, revealed that he had installed a lock on her bedroom door just a month before her death because she was worried about her safety at home. Many speculated that Nicole felt jealous of the attention Anita received, not only from their mutual friends, but also from the boys who were interested in her. Anita was uncomfortable with Nicole frequently inviting men over to their apartment and leaving them alone in her room for a day or two. Anita's friends were aware that Nicole sometimes had heated arguments with these men that turned into insults. Additionally, text messages from Nicole indicated that she was misrepresenting their relationship. In one message, Nicole stating that she was almost never at home and that she had everything in place. The police reported that over 4 people were interviewed and several DNA samples were collected from Anita's nails, the window, and the knife. At that time, these samples did not match any known individuals, but were preserved for future analysis. The investigation has not identified a prime suspect and has ruled out several individuals. For instance, Tyler was cleared from the suspect list. Although his behavior was deemed peculiar and his feelings for Anita could be seen as obsessive, there is no evidence that he was involved in the crime. Detectives concluded that this was not a case involving emotions. They also believe that the perpetrator did not enter through the window. Whoever the perpetrator was, they had a key to the apartment and could have locked the door when they left. Tyler appeared genuinely eager to assist in the investigation and find the murderer. He had no motive to harm Anita and willingly participated in interviews with both the police and the media following her death. He admitted to being in love with her, though she did not feel the same. They were merely good friends. Marty, the building maintenance worker, was also questioned multiple times, and information about him was gathered. This continued until January 2009, when Marty was found dead in his apartment. There has been much speculation over the years about Marty's involvement in the murder. His sudden death further increased suspicions that he could not bear his guilt. Anita's case remains unsolved, and for nearly 15 years, there have been no new leads. Tyler was not the only one seeking answers. Anita's family also gave interviews and shared any information, even small details, that might help resolve the case. Anita's brother Daniel, who was very close to her, died in April 2013 from emotional pain after her passing. The family believes that the death of his younger sister and his longing for her led to his severe and prolonged depression. Anna, the youngest sibling, said that Anita's passing had a serious impact on Daniel, making his life no longer the same. As a result, the family endured the loss of 2 children. In the fall of 2021, the investigation got a new lead when the American crime show Cold Justice took over Anita's case. Cold Justice is known for revisiting unsolved cases, which often leads to the arrest of suspects and obtaining confessions from them. The show's team traveled to Minot, North Dakota, to search for people who knew Anita. The Cold Justice team identified 4 main suspects in the case: Tyler, who they quickly re-interviewed and dismissed as a suspect; Michael, who had been attempting to date Anita and was the last person to communicate with her; Marty; and Nicole. Detective Maynata and the investigative team found no evidence of a conflict between Anita and Michael, leading them to eliminate him as a suspect. They also believe Marty's claim that he could not see Anita from the outside window is true. Police reports indicated that when they arrived, the lights in Anita's bedroom were off before sunset, making Marty unable to see her at that time. With Marty no longer a suspect, attention turned to Nicole. In 2021, she was arrested at the Maine Air Force Base where she worked, and charged with the murder of Anita. The sheriff of Maine testified in court that after 15 years of investigation and following various leads, they had finally taken the suspect into custody. Nicole was taken to the Ward County Jail. 2 lead detectives were assigned to Anita's case and had been investigating it for the past few years. Thanks to Cole Justice's assistance, the case has made new progress and now has an arrest warrant for Nicole. Nicole was released on $125,000 bail and is currently awaiting trial. She has the support of her husband, who has encouraged her to drop the charges. However, authorities presented strong evidence suggesting her involvement in the murder. As the investigation begins, it becomes clear that Nicole is the only person in Anita's life with whom she has conflict. Text messages between them revealed increasing hostility. Friends noted that while Anita and Nicole were very close in their youth, their relationship had soured after moving in together. Witnesses recalled arguments involving alarm clocks and fish tanks, saying Nicole had called Anita derogatory names over the years. Nicole initially avoided arrest due to her alibi. Her parents claimed she had spent the entire weekend of June 2 to 4 on their farm, which coincided with the time of Anita's death. However, a witness reported seeing Nicole at a bar about 45 minutes away from town on June 2, 2007. Nicole later told that she had returned to her apartment to get some clothes. During a preliminary hearing in late 2022, Detective Talbot presented statements from people who knew Nicole and Anita at the time of Anita's death. He pointed out inconsistencies in Nicole's testimony, which led to her being retried and questioned as a suspect. A shocking detail was revealed by Nicole's ex-boyfriend. He recalled that at a party after Anita's death, friends of both confronted Nicole and asked her about what had happened. In a drunken state, Nicole laughed and claimed she was guilty in front of everyone. In 2008, 9 statements were submitted regarding the confession Nicole made at that party. Her boyfriend also reported to the police about the incident that transpired there. However, efforts to have Nicole repeat her confession while sober were unsuccessful. Ultimately, the judge concluded that there was sufficient evidence to charge Nicole when the case goes to trial, expected to occur in mid to late 2023. Nicole's attorney, Philip Becker, was expected to point the finger at a new suspect named Devon Hall, who had been arrested for breaking into homes. Officer Mainata, who arrested Devon Hall, noted in his report that Devon claimed he had been to many houses in the area. Philip also pointed to a statement from a witness who saw a man running from the area around the time of Anita's murder, claiming the description matched Devon. The defense insisted that it was Devon who broke into the apartment and killed Anita. However, a number of reports from previous investigators and even FBI analysts supported the theory that Devon was not involved. Investigators ruled out Devon as a suspect after receiving video evidence of him being at the railway station in Minot on the evening of Anita's murder. Therefore, the person seen running away could not have been him. It is likely that the defense will try to find new arguments, especially since opinions about Anita's death differ. The prosecutor's office believes that Anita died early in the morning of June 3, shortly after sending her last SMS. If Devon was the killer, then Anita must have died much later, after he had already arrived by train on the evening of June 3. Based on the information released in this investigation, the case against Nicole remains unclear. No trial date has been set at this time. If Nicole Rice is convicted, she faces a sentence of life in prison without parole. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Roxana Vargas. Roxana Vargas was born on September 11, 1988. Venezuela. She grew up in a warm and loving family with her older sister Mariana and parents Antonio and Ana Teresa at 17. She graduated from the school at the dawn of the ball and received a scholarship from the Gran Mar Riscal Foundation to study social communications at the Catholic University of Santa Rosa in Caracas. So she and Mariana moved to the capital to live with their grandmother, who already lived there. Their parents frequently traveled to Caracas to visit them, cherishing the time spent together. By 2008, Roxana was in her 8th semester at the Faculty of Social Communications. She was also involved in the production of the well-known program Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. One of the last messages on her phone was sent on July 12, 2008. Said she was on her way to meet a friend at Plaza Venezuela. At the time, she was in the Chacom area, but then she disappeared. Initially, detectives suspected that she might have been a victim of a robbery or kidnapping. This suspicion comes from the quick kidnappings, where criminals would abduct victims for a few hours to demand a ransom, releasing them afterward. Unfortunately, many of these incidents ended tragically, with some victims being killed if their families could not pay the ransom. Investigators have ruled out a kidnapping. As Roxana's family has not received a ransom demand, they then considered the possibility of a robbery, but there was no evidence to support this theory either. On July 14, 2008, the body of a girl was discovered by a security guard working at the Biosa airline building, now known as Conveaza. Located in the Caiza Park area of Caracas, the guard heard loud barking from dogs near a vacant lot close to his workplace and decided to investigate. Upon approaching the lot, he found the lifeless body of a girl lying amidst a pile of construction debris. Shocked by the discovery, he immediately contacted a criminal investigation agency. Detectives arrived at the scene and determined that the body was buried under rubble, stones, wooden boards, and other waste. Forensic experts conducted an initial examination and concluded that the girl had been dead for approximately 36 to 48 hours. Her face was disfigured, and one of her eyes was dislodged from its socket. The body showed multiple injuries and bruises, but the primary cause of death was determined to be a skull fracture, caused by several blows to the head with a blunt object. The girl was wearing a triangular earring in her left ear, but the matching earring from her right ear was missing. The police quickly identified the victim. On July 13, the day before the body was found, a woman named Anna had reported the disappearance of her 19-year-old daughter, Roxana. Roxana's physical description matched the body, and DNA testing later confirmed her identity. In a conversation with Roxana's mother, Anna, she admitted that she suspected one person. The person she referred to was psychiatrist Edmundo Chirinos. At the time, Edmundo was 73 years old and was a well-known psychiatrist. Highly educated, he earned his surgical diploma in 1958 and graduated as a psychologist in 1960 from the Central University of Venezuela. Additionally, he obtained master's degrees in neuroscience and clinical psychology from prestigious institutions, including Oxford and Cambridge in England, the University of Marseille in France, and Quincy University in New York. By 1961, Edmundo founded the School of Psychology at the Central University of Venezuela, and in 1984, he was elected as the university's rector. He has a varied professional background, and he is also actively involved in politics. In 1988, he ran for president as a candidate of the Independent Moral Movement. By 1999, he was a member of the National Constituent Assembly. Due to his impressive academic qualifications, he served as a personal therapist for Presidents Jaime Lucinchi, Rafael Caldera, and Hugo Chavez. He also established a psychiatric clinic called Clin Uesi in La Florida, Caracas, Anna shared with detectives the reasons she suspected Edmundo of killing her daughter. She revealed that Roxana used to date him. She also mentioned that Roxana had been a patient of his, seeking help for postpartum depression after Roxana was diagnosed with depression on October 2, 2007. The family decided to consult a trusted doctor, Edmundo. At that time, Roxana was already struggling with eating disorders. Roxana had long been concerned about her weight, and these thoughts became increasingly distressing for her. Anna said that during her first consultation with Dr. Edmundo, Roxana was diagnosed with schizophrenia, a decision her family felt was made too quickly. Nevertheless, they decided to follow Edmundo's advice when he suggested that Roxana try a method that would increase her sleep time. He believed that this method could solve her problem. The sleep therapy he proposed involved taking small doses of sedatives and sleeping pills over a period of time. When Roxana met Edmundo again for further consultation, he began asking her strange questions, including whether she had a boyfriend. She replied that she did, but this was not true. She had feelings for a young man named Mariana, who did not return her affection. Mariana was also her sister's classmate, and at that time, she only had a friendly relationship with him. Edmundo then inquired if she had been intimate with her boyfriend, to which she truthfully answered no, as she was still a virgin. During their first meeting, Edmundo attempted to get physically closer to Roxana, which felt inappropriate to others, however. She began to notice that his desire for physical closeness with her was becoming more apparent. After one of Roxana's consultations, she asked her mother to take her to the pharmacy to buy sanitary pads because she had unexpectedly started her period. Roxana's mother, Anna, was aware of her daughter's menstrual cycle and knew that this period was not due yet, although this was unusual. Anna remained calm. One day, while Roxana was in another sleep therapy session with Edmundo, Anna waited in the waiting room and met another mother named Luisa, who was also there for her daughter's sleep therapy. They exchanged phone numbers, and during their conversation, Luisa revealed that her daughter had also started her period right after a session. Both speculated that these occurrences might be side effects of the sedatives and psychotropic medications their daughters were taking. On October 15, 2007, Roxana had her last consultation with Dr. Edmundo near the end of the session. She woke up when the sleeping pills she had taken stopped being effective. The first thing she noticed was a bright light shining in her eyes. Then, she felt Edmundo touch her lips and kiss her. In a matter of moments, he removed her underwear and began to assault her. She was in shock and tried to escape. But he quickly stopped her, hugged her, and said that sedatives can sometimes cause hallucinations. When she left the clinic, Roxana went to meet her mother, Anna, and together, they walked to the shopping mall. There, they met her best friend Valentina, seizing the opportunity when her mother was not listening. She told Valentina about what had happened in the clinic. Valentina was so disturbed by Roxana's story that when Roxana went to the restroom, she spoke to Anna about her concerns. When Roxana returned, Anna immediately confronted her, asking what had occurred at Edmundo's office. She recounted the events, though her memory was hazy due to the sedative. After hearing the details, Anna took Roxana to a gynecologist, and the doctor confirmed what Roxana had said. She had always been honest with her mother, so Anna believed that her daughter was not at fault. Roxana's horrifying revelation, coupled with a medical examination, shows that Edmundo took advantage of her. Anna considered suing Edmundo for violence against her daughter, Roxana, but later she felt worried about this decision. She doubted anyone would believe her because Edmundo was a famous and prestigious doctor with many connections in the political world. She worries about the consequences both she and her daughter will face if she files a complaint. After leaving the gynecology clinic, Anna takes Roxana back to Bay del Pasco for a psychological consultation with Dr. Abel. As they are concerned about her mental health, the girl was experiencing insomnia and nervous breakdowns. and she frequently expressed a desire to see Dr. Edmundo, Abel diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder and eating problems, which made her feel anxious and stressed. She underwent treatment with Abel until mid-December 2007, during which she showed significant improvement. As a result, Abel recommended that she return to Caracas to continue her studies. He also advised avoiding any meetings with Edmundo. Anna found a female psychiatrist, Audrey Rusin, at the Scarakis Treatment Center in Caracas now. Roxana could continue regular psychiatric consultations to maintain her mental health, which was a relief for Anna, however. As soon as Roxana returned to Caracas, she started an intimate relationship with Edmundo. This time, their interactions were not about consultations or treatment sessions. In her blog, she described their first encounter and mentioned that their relationship was without commitments. As Edmundo was much older than her, she also shared her feelings for him. However, she felt worried because in his eyes, she was just an object to satisfy his sexual desires. She became more and more emotionally dependent on him over time. Her family and friends realized that this relationship was still going on, and they tried everything to convince her to change her mind. They wanted to force her to break up, but she refused. Roxana trusted her mother and sister completely because they knew her very well. They noticed a sudden change in her mood. Initially, she hoped that Edmundo would develop feelings for her, but as time went on, her hopes faded. By May 2008, she was fed up because she no longer wanted to be the object for him to satisfy his sexual desires. She threatened him that if he did not change, she would make their relationship public. She also planned to gather evidence of his mistreatment of other patients. She warned him that if the incident was exposed, his career would be over, as no one would want to see him for medical treatment anymore. Edmundo understood Roxana better than ever. He was aware that she had once participated in a popular television program, giving her a platform to share her story with the media. Additionally, the TV channel that aired the program was owned by someone who had previously clashed with he, making the fallout even more serious. It became clear to he that if she went public, it could lead to a nationwide scandal. On July 12, 2008, around 2 p.m., Roxana met with Mariana, a young man she had previously loved. In the Chacao area, he was supposed to help her write a script. The meeting took place at a shopping mall around 6 p.m. However, the meeting was interrupted when Edmundo kept calling to harass Roxana. She felt forced to cancel her date with Mariana, saying she needed to see her best friend. Irma, however, Mariana, who knew Roxana well, quickly realized she was actually going to see Edmundo. In fact, Mariana, Roxana and her sister were all close friends and knew about her relationship with Edmundo. He had told her many times that he did not approve of the relationship, but his words had no effect. She often had to come up with excuses to hide from her friends and family whenever she went on a date with Edmundo because she did not want to be criticized. Ultimately, Mariana had no choice but to put her in a taxi, knowing she was indeed heading to meet Edmundo. Earlier that evening, she had planned to meet Irma, but she eventually texts Irma to say she's going to meet someone Irma also knows. Referring to Edmundo, Irma understood immediately. When Irma called, she around 7:40 p.m., but only received a brief answer. After that call, no one heard from Roxana again. When the police began investigating the case, Edmundo tried to defend himself and gave interviews about Roxana's disappearance. During the interview, he confirmed that she had come to the clinic that day, but had only stayed for a few minutes. On July 21, 2008, Edmundo was called to the prosecutor's office to testify as a witness, but failed to appear. Consequently, the detectives assigned to the case searched his belongings, starting with his office at the La Florida clinic. There, they discovered a triangular earring, which matched the one found on Roxana's body. They also found blood stains in the office and collected samples for DNA analysis using luminol. Forensic experts found large bloodstains on the sofa, which appeared to have been meticulously cleaned. Along with hair, DNA testing confirmed that both the blood and hair belonged to Roxana at that time. Edmundo lived in a penthouse in the Cebucan neighborhood of Caracas, however. It wasn't long before the police arrived at his residence. What they discovered among his personal belongings shocked them. They found 1.2 photographs of women, some naked, others in their underwear. Most of these photos were taken at his clinic, and the women appear to be under the influence of psychotropic drugs. Among the photographs were also images of Roxana. This evidence implicated Edmundo in Roxana's death. Despite this, he denied all accusations from the start. On August 1, 2008, Edmundo was arrested and charged with the attempted murder of Roxana. During the initial hearing, the court ordered that he remain under house arrest while the investigation continued. He was also prohibited from leaving the country, and his medical license was suspended, however. Despite these bans, he continued to quietly provide psychological counseling services at home for 2 years. Until the trial began, it was not until the trial that he was permanently stripped of his medical license. Edmundo's trial officially began on March 16, 2010. The prosecution presented its case based on evidence gathered during the investigation. According to them, on July 12, 2008, Edmundo asked Roxana to come to his office. Shortly after 7:00 p.m., she went to his clinic in La Florida, where he struck her repeatedly in the head with a blunt object. An autopsy revealed that she had suffered at least 7 skull fractures. Additionally, the amount of drugs in her system far exceeded the recommended therapeutic dose. It was also discovered that she had been taking antidepressants during the trial. The prosecution has established that Roxana, due to her psychological condition, was emotionally unstable and easily manipulated. Edmundo, being medically trained, was fully aware of this and exploited his expertise to manipulate and intimidate her. 15 women testified during the trial, all alleging that Edmundo had subjected them to abuse during sleep therapy sessions. The court verified their claims. Edmundo's defense team argued that Roxana's visit to his office that day was very brief, suggesting he had no involvement in her murder. They attempted to shift the blame to someone else, asserting that he had no connection to the crime. However, despite these efforts to distort the facts, the evidence presented to the court was overwhelming. In September 2010, the court sentenced Edmundo Chirinos to 20 years in prison to be served in the state of Miranda. At that time, the maximum sentence for similar cases was 30 years. While in prison, Edmundo underwent surgery in the intensive care unit. Afterward, it was claimed that he could neither speak nor walk and began using a wheelchair less than 2 years later. In March 2012, he was released from prison to serve the rest of his sentence at home. This news spread across various media outlets, and what drew attention was that, upon his release, he was speaking perfectly normally. This sparked public outrage. As many saw it as an injustice, it appeared that arrangements had been made to allow him to return home. It became evident that the surgery had not resulted in the severe complications that were initially reported, leading to speculation about the true reasons for his release. On August 24, 2013, Edmundo passed away at his home from natural causes. The story of Roxana and Edmundo remains etched in the minds of many Venezuelans and is considered one of the most shocking cases in the country's history. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the disturbing case of Ryan Wingarden. In the shadow of seemingly peaceful family relationships, sometimes lurk horrifying secrets. The case of Ryan Wingarden and his sister Gail is a terrifying example of human depravity. At the same time, The terrible consequences of greed and the desire to protect shameful secrets, a blood relationship turned into a nightmare. This devastating event shook an entire community and left an indelible mark. Ryan's case revolves around jealousy, a person willing to kill to keep their secrets hidden. The story takes place in Holland, Michigan, a small town known for its rich Dutch heritage and culture. The town's charm and beautiful scenery create a pleasant atmosphere. Newlyweds Gail and Rick Brink lived in a northern town that seemed perfect for they to build their future together. They were excited to begin renovating their new home. Sadly, jealousy and hidden secrets shattered that happiness. Now, let's talk about Pam, Ryan's wife. She kept a devastating secret for 25 years to protect her family, career, and reputation. The burden of hiding this truth became unbearable, and on January 18, 2013, it all came to light in front of detectives. Pam revealed the long-held secret that had haunted her out of love and fear. She allowed her husband to dominate her life. Ryan controlled whom she could talk to and even threatened her life. For 25 years, she lived in torment with the knowledge of how Gail and Rick were murdered back in time. When Gail was 19 and Rick was 22, they met at work in 1984. Rick was so taken by her that he told his mother he had found the one he wanted to marry. Gail came from a large family with 8 children and was not financially well off, but she was ambitious, determined, and knew her goals. When she met Rick, she felt it was destiny, and they formed a strong couple. They knew they needed to work together to build the life they dreamed of. Soon, Gail decided to move in with Rick, and on April 25, 1986, they got married. Just one day after Gail turned 21, they planned to purchase a house together. After their honeymoon, they returned to Michigan and began searching for a ranch-style home with 20 acres of land on the outskirts of town. This type of property was perfect for the newlyweds, who wanted to start their life together. Rick successfully negotiated with the bank and managed to buy the property at a good price. But the house required extensive repairs. Fortunately, Rick had previously trained as a carpenter's apprentice, and his skills are very useful for renovation. Gail and Rick moved into their new house in 1987 and started making repairs. On November 21, they attended the wedding of one of Rick's school friends. Enjoying time with friends, this would be the last day anyone saw them alive. By November 23, 1987, neither Rick nor Gail showed up for work, which was highly unusual as they were both dedicated employees who never missed a day. Concerned, Rick's parents were alerted by their employer about Rick and Gail's absence. Immediately, they went to Rick's home on Ransom Street. When they arrived, they found Rick's SUV still parked in the driveway. But what they discovered next left them shocked and horrified. Rick was found in the front seat with attacked by force to his head. His parents quickly called the police. The Ottawa County Sheriff's Department arrived and secured the area. Upon searching the home, they discovered Gail dead on the marital bed, her face obscured by a bloody pillow. When the pillow was taken away, police discovered that Gail had been assaulted 3 times. Both Rick and Gail had been brutally murdered. When they had only been married for 18 months, the inspection of the crime scene revealed that nothing in the home had been disturbed. This created a mystery that baffled the officers. Initially, police suspected Rick may have murdered Gail and then harmed self-harm in the car outside. However, this theory was quickly dismissed after the bodies were moved and examined. As no gun was found in the house or nearby, they then considered the possibility of a robbery. But further examination showed that all belongings were in their original places, all the money was accounted for, and there were no signs of forced entry. struggle, or any damage, both Gail and Rick were still wearing their jewelry, and the entire house was clean, with hardly any evidence found. Here, they found no weapon at the scene. Also, could not locate the bullet casings during the search. The police found fingerprints. 4 belonged to Gail and Rick. While 2 were from an unknown source, 1 fingerprint was found on the toilet seat and the other on the phone. The police checked these prints against their database, but found no matches, lacking physical evidence. They shifted their focus to gathering information about the victim's lifestyle and habits by interviewing friends and family. Ryan described Gail and Rick as the sweetest couple he had ever known, stating he had never seen a husband and wife get along so well. Rick's brother, Batbrink, called the funeral an incredibly sad occasion. Gail's family, particularly her sister Cheryl and Ryan, were especially grief-stricken after the mourning period ended. The police resumed their investigation, exploring different leads, but still lacked any evidence. Multiple theories emerged, but all the leads proved fruitless and unverified. A month later, on December 24, 1987, another shocking crime occurred. Deborah and her husband were found dead in their backyard, both with their throats slit. This case bore similarities to the previous murder of Gail and Rick. Nothing was stolen. There were no signs of a break-in, and no clear motives could be identified. The remarkable point is that the two families lived only half a mile apart, raising concerns among the public and investigators. However, this connection was dismissed when differences between the two cases were identified. The murders of Rick and Gail appear to have been carried out in a premeditated manner, suggesting a planned murder. Another theory caught the attention of investigators. Gail was looking into financial irregularities at her workplace, and the dossier she took home went missing. However, this theory was eventually set aside as the police ran out of leads, and the case went cold. Despite this, the murders of Rick and Gail remained in the public's memory. In 2007, 20 years after the murders, a group of investigators established a cold case unit in the Tawa County Sheriff's Department. This unit was led by detectives Venus Repper and David Blakely. In there, the Brink murder was one of the cases they chose to investigate. Although the documents were old, they managed to recover important notes. Venus and David noticed some remarkable details during their discussions with friends and family. They frequently heard the name of Ryan, unlike other family members. Ryan often made bizarre comments during family gatherings. Relatives recalled that he exhibited odd behavior. For example, he once claimed to have a vivid mental image of Gail's murder, stating he could see someone walking down the hallway to her bedroom. Cheryl remembered him saying, "Sometimes I wonder if I could have done something like that." Additionally, Ryan confessed to his sister Lynn that he felt a need to apologize to Gail because he believed he had violated her. During the previous investigation, police had ruled Ryan out as a suspect due to an alibi provided by his then-girlfriend, Pam. She claimed that on the night of the murder, she was doing laundry with Ryan, and her account matched his, making his story credible. And then, it was later revealed that Pam and Ryan had actually gone to a friend's house that night to use the washing machine. Upon reviewing the reports, detectives found inconsistencies in Pam's testimony. Although Pam's testimony strongly supported Ryan's alibi, the polygraph test revealed a different story. When asked if she was with Ryan that night, Pam said no, and the polygraph indicated no deception in her response. This raised concerns, so detectives decided to investigate further by visiting Pam in the trailer park where she lived with Ryan and their children. At that time, Pam and Ryan had been married for 23 years and had 3 children together. Pam had first met Ryan in 1987 when she was a single mother with a 6-month-old baby. They married in 1990 and remained together since then. The detectives arrived at the trailer park and were greeted by Ryan. Since marrying Pam, Ryan had become a devoted husband and was actively involved in raising their children. He informed the investigators that Pam was not home, and they asked him about his account of the double murder that occurred that night. Ryan's recollection of events was quite vague. After the brief investigation, the detectives arranged to meet with Pam at the department later, but Ryan insisted on being present for the conversation. They informed him that this was not possible, as they needed to question Pam alone. Pam's account was consistent with the alibi she and Ryan had previously provided. Despite this, Detectives Venus and David sensed that something was off. They were determined to investigate further, delve into Gail's and Rick's past. As they looked into Pam and Ryan's relationship, they discovered that Ryan had not always been faithful to Pam while dating her. He had also been involved with another woman, Crystal Beelan, with whom he had an unstable relationship for 4 years. She ended things with Ryan when she realized he was becoming serious with Pam. But their friendship continued. Detectives located Crystal and invited her to the department, where she agreed to come in voluntarily. The interrogation proceeded smoothly, and no incriminating evidence emerged during the conversation. However, she disclosed a significant secret that changed the direction of the case. She revealed that Ryan had previously confessed to her about an incestuous relationship he had with Gail when they were younger. A few days after the murder, Ryan had asked Crystal to drive past the crime scene, but she found it inconvenient. So they went to a nearby park instead. While at the park, Ryan expressed a need to talk and said he wanted to share a heavy secret with her. He then recounted the sexual relationship he had with Gail, claiming that it was consensual. However, he mentioned that, in his last request to Gail in the backyard, she rejected him, but he still proceeded with his intentions and forced himself on Gail. Ryan showed Crystal pictures of Gail in a bikini, expressing how he couldn't take his eyes off Gail and that he was deeply attracted to her. It seemed he was the only one aware of his feelings. One day, Rick caught Ryan staring at Gail, leading to some suspicion on Rick's part. Although he didn't confront Ryan about it, Crystal's revelation about Ryan's feelings gave the detectives a new perspective on the case, but her information wasn't sufficient, prompting the need for more investigation to gather more details. They needed to speak with Pam. When Ryan and Pam arrived at the office, it was challenging to persuade Ryan to allow the detectives to speak with Pam privately. Eventually, he relented, and the questioning of Pam began. In Pam's testimony, she revealed that she was deeply in love with Ryan, particularly because Ryan was encouraging her and her child to move in with him. However, the situation quickly took a turn for the worse. That evening, Ryan took Pam to Gail's house, he parking in a way that would keep them hidden. He then led Pam to Rick's car. When Pam looked inside, she saw Rick's body on the front seat. Ryan didn't allow her to linger. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the house, leading her down the hallway. In the master bedroom, they have seen Gail's lifeless body, which appeared to be peacefully sleeping. Ryan picked up a pillow and placed it over Gail's face, saying, "Isn't she beautiful?" He then turned to Pam with a threatening look and warned, "If you go to the police or tell anyone what I did, this could happen to you too." Terrified, Pam fled from the house, despite the horror she had just witnessed. That night, she stayed with Ryan at his house. The next morning, they continued their lives as if nothing had happened. When Pam insisted on knowing why Ryan killed Rick and Gail, he finally confessed that he had a sexual relationship with Gail when they were younger. He was afraid that Rick might have found out about it. Over time, Ryan also revealed that he envied the success of Gail and Rick because he felt unsuccessful in his own life. He made money by selling small amounts of illegal substances. And after marrying Pam, she became the main provider for the family, While he stayed home to raise their children, Ryan was jealous of Gail's life and her husband, their new home. With her career, he was consumed by jealousy and resentment. Watching Gail be happy with someone else, Ryan was quickly arrested after Pam's confession. However, he maintained that he did not kill the family. He only admitted to having had a sexual relationship with his sister Gail before her marriage. The family had mixed feelings after the investigation concluded, but they were relieved that the case was closed and Ryan was in custody. The police searched Ryan's home, but did not find the murder weapon or clothing, which was expected given the time that had passed since the crime. The fingerprints from the crime scene did not match Ryan's, but the motive for the murders was compelling. As a result, Ryan was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. His trial began in March 2014 in Ottawa County Court. The prosecution argued that Ryan was driven by jealousy and feared that Gail would reveal their incestuous relationship. 60 witnesses testified against him, but it was Pam's testimony that ultimately determined Ryan's fate. In Pam's testimony in court, Ryan reacted by hurling insults at her, leading the court to reprimand him and have him removed from the courtroom. Pam recounted her troubled marriage to Ryan and described the night he took her to see the bodies of the victims. Additionally, Ryan's cellmate testified that Ryan bragged in prison about his murders and expressed a desire to kill his other sister, Cheryl. Because she was assisting in the investigation, Ryan also defended himself, but his statements were erratic and confusing. He claimed that the authorities were conspiring against him, suggesting they needed to close the case. He alleged that the police had coerced Pam into giving false testimony. On March 28, 2014, the jury reached a verdict. Ryan Weingarten was found guilty of both murder charges. During his sentencing, Ryan shouted and made threats when asked to calm down. Ryan Weingarten was ultimately sentenced to 2 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole after the trial. Cheryl expressed her feelings, stating that although she had loved her brother all her life, she now despised the person he had become. Ryan's mother never accepted the verdict and passed away in 2021 at the age of 90. Pam later divorced Ryan. He has lost all his appeals and remains imprisoned to this day, although it took more than 2 decades. The truth has finally come to light, thanks to the efforts of investigators and the cooperation of those who dare to speak out. This is not only a story of paying for crime, but also a reminder that justice, however slow, can still be served when those involved continue to seek the truth. The case of Ryan Weingarten highlights the consequences of crime and also exposes the darkest corners of family relationships. Ryan's moral degradation. He killed his sister and her husband to hide his secrets, with his actions stemming from selfishness, jealousy, and sick motives. He turned his family, which should have been the safest place. Weingarten suffered emotional highs and lows throughout the sentencing, crying at points and flaring up at others. At one point, he quoted from the Bible and then exclaimed loudly that he did not commit the crime, expressing his belief that the Lord knew he was innocent and that he had only told the truth. He referred to himself as an innocent man who was shackled for no reason other than what Repper and Blakely suggested to his wife. He reminisced about the night his daughter, whom he referred to as his little angel sent down from heaven, was conceived. He encouraged his children to be good citizens, advising them not to cheat, lie, or steal, and to be good neighbors who were quick to forgive. At several points during his speech, he wept, stating that he was an innocent man stripped of his family and wife because of lies. Assistant Ottawa County Prosecutor Lee Fisher remarked that Weingarten's outburst only reinforced the opinion that he had committed the killings, implying that he was definitely not in touch with reality. Fisher added that the conviction provided closure for both families and signified that justice had been served, allowing them to no longer wonder what had happened to their brother and Gail. "My sister's been dead for 27 years, Murphy sobbed. "Now, I can go to her grave and say goodbye. You know, we're done. We're done. We finally got him, Gail and Rick. You can rest in peace now." Detective Blakely retired shortly after the trial ended. Repper said she's not sure who her new partner or what her next cold case investigation will be, but that she hopes to continue to bring justice to victims and closure to their families. This case highlights how hidden secrets can have devastating effects. Weingarten harbored a dark secret for years before it was uncovered. It demonstrates the psychological and emotional toll of suppressing the truth and how it eventually surfaces, often with significant consequences. Weingarten's conviction was largely based on the testimony of his wife, who revealed his confession after decades of marriage. This underscores how trust in relationships can be strained when significant wrongdoings are involved. It also shows how the burden of knowledge can compel individuals to seek justice, even at personal cost. The case remained unsolved for over 20 years, until investigators revisited it using modern interrogation techniques and social dynamics. This underscores the importance of persistence and advancements in forensic science and investigation, which can bring justice even decades after a crime. The murder stemmed from jealousy and unresolved issues within the family. It serves as a reminder that family disputes, if left unchecked, can escalate into tragic outcomes. Communication and conflict resolution within families are crucial, despite the passage of time. The judicial system demonstrated that justice can still be served. This case serves as a reminder to victims' families and society that crimes will not be forgotten, and efforts will continue to uncover the truth.